To take control of this year's Tour de France fell apart yesterday after an eye-popping time trial re-established Jan Ullrich's presence as again a serious contender. Lance managed to stay in yellow despite finishing second behind the man known as the Kaiser, who completely annihilated the rest of the field. Now the tables are turned as the pressure once more falls on the American to perform in the mountains. The race now goes to the Pyrenees, the next battleground, as the Tour continues here on OLN. Well, the water looks rather cooling today on yet another hot day in the Tour de France, and it's going to be hot in more ways than one because today we are into the Pyrenees. Although we've given the finish line a new name here, it is in fact the climb of Bonasque. We've been here before. Felix Cardenas won on that occasion. Armstrong attacked Jan Ullrich. I wonder if he'll do that today.
Well, he's going to have to attack over the next 4 days, Phil, if he wants to win the Tour de France this year, because the big German is right back at the top.
Yeah, that's for sure. Let's have a look then at the map today. The first of 4 tough days, interfered with by a rest day while we stay here in the Pyrenees. Right down in the far south of France, we often get big thunderstorms down this way, but there's no sign of any clouds in the sky. Paul, this is a route which will be very painful, but not for quite a few kilometres on the way out.
Well, the first 100 kilometres, 65 miles or so, is exceptionally flat, and it will be a hot day for the riders. Up around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, as it has been almost since the start of the Tour de France in Paris. But it's once we get to the Pyrenees and the small town of Quillon that all the excitement really begins. And I think everybody's very worried about this climb towards the end, because this climb here of the Col de Paillere is one that the Tour de France has never been over before. They plunge then down into the valley and then up to the summit of this climb that we know as the Plateau de Bonasque. It's all the action at the end there, Phil, in this 197 kilometre stage.
Well, this is a second time we've come up here. It's now called the Aix Trois Domaines. That's named after the ski stations up here, but we know it as the climb to Bonasque. Toulouse we left for the 25th time this morning and had a long flat ride. 2 sprints, we'll give you the results of those in a moment. And the King of the Mountains competition, Richard Virenque back in competition today with a 60-point lead in the King of the Mountains. Baden Cook still under pressure from Robin McEwen, only leading the green jersey by 8 points, and still 1,330 miles to go. Let's have a look what's happened so far today. It's been all of action actually since the race started. There is Lance Armstrong. Let's hope that mentally he wasn't struck too much by being beaten yesterday by Jan Ullrich in the time trial. Certainly Lance and Jan are now locked together. So too Alexander Vinokourov. 3 great riders heading towards the Pyrenees with less than a minute separating them. But a breakaway already in progress after 41 kilometres. And here in this sprint here, Saint-Michel de Lannes. It was the teammate of Stuart O'Grady. It's Thor Hushovd taking out the sprint ahead of Dacruz, the teammate of Baden Cook, and Laurent Brochard, the former world champion. A bit of a distant 3rd place there. And it was the same result too, except that Hushovd, Dacruz and Bertolini was the order of the 2nd sprint. Now we're looking at live pictures now, and rather unusual. The latest time check we have with 94 kilometres to go is 6.5 minutes. It was out as far as 8 minutes 28. Most important thing is, Paul, the best man in that breakaway is Armstrong's teammate, Chechu Rubiera, and he is well up there now with a 17-minute drop in overall classification. He's looking at a 6-minute gain today.
Well, tactically, this is an ideal situation for US Postal Service because they don't really need to chase. We're looking at the back end of the field. This is Sandy Cassar. A very difficult Tour de France for him right now. He's been suffering over the last few days just to stay in contact with this bike race, a man who the French believe is a star of the future, but I think maybe just a little bit too much racing this year with the Tour of Italy in his legs, followed up by a very difficult Tour of Switzerland. But I think the story about yesterday, Phil, was that incredible time trial by Jan Ullrich, because if you take Jan Ullrich out of the mix, Armstrong did a very good job in the time trial. He put time between himself and all of the climbers, which is what he wanted to do in the time trial. But Jan Ullrich showed us just how superb and how great an athlete he is by coming back for the first time to the Tour de France in 2 years.
He did, and that time trial, a superb ride it was by Ulrich, actually eliminated 2 riders. The Echeverria, the same name but 2 different countries, Venezuela and Spain, but both on the same Euskadi team, and the loss of 2 riders could be very, very valuable for the team as we go through the Pyrenees. They might miss David Echeverria and Unai Echeverria, both eliminated yesterday. They arrived just inside the time limit, but they were both penalised for pacing behind other riders. Once their time penalties were added on, they were outside the elimination time and they were kicked out. And a lot of riders did get eliminated. If you're watching our coverage yesterday, you will remember Gerrit Glomser trailing a rider for a long way. He received over a 6-minute time penalty for that too. So the judges were very hard yesterday. And another rider not starting today was Pietro Cauchioli, who's had a reasonable tour. So he also out, so the field's down to 164. Now we're looking at the leading group here at the moment, and let us remind ourselves after that time trial. Here it is. Armstrong, despite the fact that he's not exactly running away with the Tour de France, he's still in the yellow jersey. Jan Ullrich 34 seconds now into second. Vinokurov didn't lose much. He went from second to third and is still less than a minute behind. Hamilton up into fourth place at 2:59. Heimar Zubeldia rode great yesterday and he's a good climber. He's in a menacing 5th place. Iban Mayo down from 3rd to 6th. Mancebo also down to 7th. Ivan Basso hovering there in the top 10 in 8th. Menchov up into 9th place. Of some other names, Georg Toschnik's promising to attack here in the Pyrenees is 12th. David Miller, suffering from bronchitis, still came up from 19th to 14th. And there you see Simoni, the winner of the Tour of Italy, in 72nd place. Well, the beauty now, because the long flat haul, which has brought us away from Toulouse, we are now penetrating the valleys here. This is the valley of Benasque as we head right down towards the climb up to the finish today. Really, Paul, all of the climbs are coming to us in the last 40 kilometres, 25 miles of the stage, and we've got 93 to go.
Well, it will be very difficult, in fact, because that is a tough climb towards the end.
I'll tell you what, it's a scorcher today too. They're saying it's 91 degrees Fahrenheit in the valleys right now and a high humidity at 33%. It's going to be something like 85 when they get to the finish on the mountains. That is hot for the Pyrenees, believe me. Team Seiko, I'm a little bit mystified as to why Seiko are doing a lot of the pacemaking here, because they've got nobody in the overall. Maybe they're preparing a breakaway today for Gilberto Simoni when we get to the mountains. We'll find out. We'll take our first break. Rejoin us here on OLN. Welcome back. This is moments ago. The camera's catching Jan Ullrich being brought back into the peloton by some members of his team. We think he may have stopped by the roadside for just a natural break, and it doesn't look like it's a problem any more serious than that, but they were quickly on the job. They're pacing their man back, and the peloton not really under pressure at the moment. The breakaway of 10 riders, which got away after 22 kilometres a day, still away. Well, don't forget, if you've ever had 8,000 pounds of bolts snorting down your neck, experience the running of the bolts, coming to you from Pamplona in Spain, from the comfort of your sofa tonight, and that's on OLN at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So the peloton, as you can see, not really under great pressure. The latest check we've got at 6 minutes 22 seconds. But it looks, Paul, as though they're not going to exactly run at this mountain, although they're holding that breakaway. They are actually catching it, you know, in the last, since I've given a time check, it's 6:18 now.
Well, they are catching it, and that's because of the pressure put on at the front by Team Seiko. I think
Sandy might be saying goodbye to them.
Sandy Cassar is having a very difficult time. He's a long way down in the overall classification. Rather sad to see, and I think maybe the team made a mistake with his preparation. He rode a very hard Tour of Italy. In fact, he finished in the top 15 in the overall classification. He then went on to the Tour of Switzerland, and I think that's too much racing for a young rider. You look, on the other hand, at Lance Armstrong. He only has about 25 days of racing in his legs this year, and in fact, talking to his coach Chris Carmichael felt that maybe Armstrong was slightly under-raced this year, and well, Chris probably knows because he spent a long time as the confidant and coach to Lance Armstrong, but we'll know the answer to all of those little questions, I think, Phil, in the next 4 days.
Yes, you know, this race has been such a marvellous Tour de France from the competitive viewpoint as well as reporting viewpoint. I've just got that sneaking feeling the winner will not be known till the end of the time trial, which in fact is a week today before the Tour finishes in Paris. I think a lot of the experts, especially the ex-bike riders, are saying, no, the Pyrenees, we'll know the winner by the time we leave the Pyrenees. But less than a minute, Paul. We've already crossed the Alps. I think these boys are going to fight all the way.
This is one of the lowest advantages Armstrong has had going into the second section of mountains, and in fact as they go through the feeding station here, it is very important for all of these bike riders to keep themselves topped up with fluid on days like this, because if you lose just a small... Oh, this looks as if Sandy Cassar is slowing down at the feeding station. Oof, that was good.
Slowing down is the word, but fortunately for him, the peloton has slowed right down almost to a stop, and he's making a meal of this. And that was a bad pun, I'm sorry about that, as he comes back into the field here. He's a very tired man, but he's a proud man, and he's French, of course. He does not want to abandon his home tour, not in the 100th year of the Tour de France. So he's only had one win this year, Sandy Cassar. It was in the Tour de Suisse just before this race began, but his ride in the Giro was exceptional, 13th place there. But as Paul has said, I'm not sure a man so young at 24 should be riding two big tours so close together.
Very difficult to do, especially this year with the Giro d'Italia being such a difficult race, and he's probably not just had enough time to recover. Well, I tell you what, as we look here further down there, we are hearing that Ulrich is having a problem with his intestines.
Now, he had this problem on Alpe d'Huez.
Very strange at it, but it's something that happens in a hot Tour de France. Riders take on board huge volumes of water, up to 7 or 8 litres of water during the course of the stage, and that can really make it very difficult with the intestinal problems that many of these riders do get.
Looking here at the remnants of the Chateau de Puivert, and this area abounds in history. But Paul, you know, we often get emails coming in about everybody has to be us. You can't stay in the bike for 7 hours on some days and drink all this fluid, not have to pay a visit to the bathroom. And well, as long as they do it out of sight of the public, that's what the rule states, it's not a problem. And very often the riders tell each other what's going to happen, and they call a little truce, and they all sort of pop off the back into the bushes. But they're not allowed to do it in front of the public. They do actually get fined for that. It's called comportement irrégulier. Incorrect, that's right.
Well, it's a strange thing. A lot of riders can actually answer a nature break on the bike riding along at 30 or 40 kilometers an hour. That's something I could never do. I actually had to find a couple of guys at the side of the peloton and ask them if they'd stop with me, and then try and get back on through the field. But you can't do that if the field is hammering along as it is today, because we're looking... There's a problem there. He obviously didn't like what was in that bag.
Well, either that or he got it completely wrong. There we are. This, I think, is a rider who's just been... Astolosa, yes.
He's back in the team cars right now. He could be having a hard time. He was in the breakaway a couple of days ago, and I would expect he's in the second string of team cars here, which would indicate he has been left behind on the mountain road. The team cars in the Tour de France are actually split up into two convoys. Car number 1 is always right up behind the peloton. Then there's a gap of a few minutes, and the second convoy of cars is a little bit further back, and I have a feeling this man is in that convoy right now, so he'll have a hard time staying in the race today.
Well, he's looking for his team car for a word of advice. Bit surprised to see Mikel Astolosa back here. Right, here we go. Pens and paper out again. I got it wrong yesterday, by the way. We're going to give you our Camelback trivia question. Here it is. And I'm as interested you to know what it is. By how much did Maurice Guérin win the inaugural Tour de France 100 years ago? Well, I know the answer to that one, so I'll tell it to you after the break. I'll tell you what, thinking hours rather than minutes. Oh, how much did Maurice Guérin win the inaugural Tour de France by 100 years ago? Wait for it. It's more than 2 hours, and it's 2 hours and 49 minutes. And it's still the biggest margin ever for victory in the Tour de France. And we're only jousting here down on the sand as they're enjoying a little bit of a trip back into the far past at the chateau. As the race now continues, because we are about 84 kilometres from the finish right now. The gap is around about 6 minutes. Seiko, for reasons yet to be disclosed, are setting the pace at the front, in front of Armstrong's US Postal Service team.
Well, I have a feeling the only reason they can be doing that is because their man Gilberto Simoni feels today that he's got a very good chance of winning a mountain top finish. Whatever you think about Gilberto Simoni, even if he is a long way down in the overall classification, Salvatore Commesso not too happy at all, Phil, there with the fact that the team have got to come and ride at the front end of the pack. He is one of the best uphill racers in the world, and he will be looking at this stage today to try and get him and his team some glory, at least out of this Tour de France.
Well, it would be a great return for him because he started spreading the rumour, in fact, the day before we arrived to the first rest day, that he was not going to continue after Marseille. He has continued, and I think somebody persuaded him to say, look, you're so far behind now, you can win a stage of this race in the Pyrenees, and that is a big consolation prize. So I think that's why they persuaded him to stay in. Commesso, by the way, Paul, another one that the riders penalised quite heavily yesterday in the time trial. Well, don't forget, we had 198 riders 2 weeks ago at the start of this race in Paris. Now we're down to 164, and only 6 of the 22 teams still have all the riders present.
One of those 6 teams is the team of Lance Armstrong, US Postal Service, and Armstrong still not panicking about that performance yesterday. After all, let's not forget, only one man in this bike race actually beat him, and that was Jan Ullrich, and he still has a full complement of riders to help him over the mountain stages, and he will not say enough good things about his team, and he says that he has the best team in the race, and I don't think anybody can contradict him there. And he's got a great team of climbers, and this race over the next few days is going to be decided on the climbs.
Might well be. The fact that Lance Armstrong has a great team is going to make him win his 5th Tour de France. Don't forget, Lance Armstrong has yet to win a stage in the 2003 Tour, and he's always done it when he's won the races in the past, so I'm sure he's quite conscious of that. And he would have done it yesterday, but for the fact that Jan Ullrich suddenly returned to his great time trialling form.
Well, in fact, it took him a long time in 2000 to get himself a win. He didn't win a stage of the Tour right up until about the 19th stage. And right now, I think he has an ideal situation because he and his team can just sit back and allow and force everybody else to do the pacemaking, because Jose Luis Rubiera, nicknamed Chechu by all of the team, is in the leading group of 10. They built themselves up an advantage at one stage of 8 minutes and 40 seconds. And Rubiera is the kind of guy who can actually stay well to the front in the mountain passes, so it puts pressure on everybody else in the race to actually chase him down.
Well, the peloton, they're keeping a pretty steady speed up here. They are controlling that breakaway, which I'm quite surprised they bothered with it. It is now 6 minutes 17 seconds. Very good combination for Rubiera. He's best placed at 17 minutes of that breakaway. And we're hearing now, as I tell you this, that in fact Danilo De Luca has abandoned at the feeding station where the riders have just come through. So we're now down to 163, and Seiko have lost a man. And ironically, it was Seiko who was setting the pace that sent De Luca off the back.
Looking at the leading group of 10 here, Rubiera, Gonzalez, Di Galdiano, Freire, as well as Verbrugge, Brochard, Turpin, Zeberg and Bertolini. This is a very good breakaway situation for US Postal Service, and you can actually see here at the back in the blue jersey, Chechu Rubiera has been told by the team management not to participate in the success of the breakaway. They have an advantage of 6 minutes and 20 seconds over the main field. It's an ideal situation for Rubiera because if they don't get caught, he can win himself the stage because he is a great climber, one of the great climbers on the US Postal Service team. But right now he's acting as a tactical pawn in the game that Lance Armstrong is playing with the other teams in this race. They realise this man's climbing ability. They dare not allow him a 10 or 15 minute advantage on a stage like this because he could actually end up winning the Tour.
Yeah, because he's got all of the ability, you say, Paul, and it's a good ploy because now it's making the other riders chase at the back of the pack and hopefully giving Lance Armstrong a bit of a quieter ride today, because there's no doubt Lance is not riding as he has done these past 4 years, but he's still the leader of the Tour and he's still an incredibly good bike rider. What he has shown us these last few days is, like ordinary cyclists in the Tour de France, he can suffer just as much, and if he does win this Tour, he'll look back, I'm sure he'll say it was his greatest of the 5.
I think what a lot of people noticed about Armstrong over the last few days is the human side to him, because a lot of people in the past have said, oh, Armstrong is unbeatable, he's superhuman, but I think he has really suffered in these last few days, and I feel the crowd actually swinging around in the popularity stakes towards Lance Armstrong. There were a couple of years ago when they were shouting and booing him on the slopes of the Mont Ventoux. Well, when he got into the starting gate yesterday, Phil, for the start of that time trial, the crowd were all behind him.
We haven't heard any bad mouthing about Lance on this Tour de France. You know, even the press seem to be laying off him now and seem to like him more. And it could be because he's making a bigger effort at the finishing lines to speak their language, which he can speak. And I think people begin to warm to him when they can actually get a feel for him. And there's none of the old booing and shouting that we've seen in previous years for Lance. I think he's accepted here again. But we're looking at Postal riding second team. There's Armstrong in that yellow jersey. By our calculation, today he will go over the great Jacques Anquetil, having won more yellow jerseys than him. This will be his 52nd at the end of the day if he keeps it, and that'll make him the 4th most yellow jerseyed rider in the history of the Tour de France.
It certainly will. And as we look here at the back, this is number 131, Jan Ullrich. And we are hearing that Jan has a slight intestinal problem today, but there was no such problem yesterday on the roads of that individual time trial, where he absolutely blew the whole of the field apart.
We're looking at 79 kilometres still to race, but of course the vicious roads lie ahead, and there's plenty of racing to come on today's stage of Tour de France. You won't miss very much at all, as we now go off to our next break here on the Outdoor Life Network. But stay. We're continuing now here on OLN to head for the first big Pyrenean climbs of this year's Tour de France. 4 days we will have in the mountains over the next 5, because we do have a rest day in between. The US Postal team of Lance Armstrong still all present and correct. And of course at the top of them is Lance Armstrong himself leading. But look at this now, all of their riders are in the top 100. But remember Victor Hugo Peña, when he was leading the Tour for 3 days, he's now last of the team, over 78 minutes behind in the classification. That's not important at all. The fact is Peña will be strong in the mountains to ride by Armstrong along with the other Spanish riders in this squad. And we're looking here now at Ribeira, who is one of a 10-man breakaway that got away today after 22 kilometres, and the gap at the moment is just on 6¼ minutes. Well, as the team races towards Cayon there, Paul, I just saw a banner over the road announcing an international cycle race coming soon after the Tour to the town.
It's a very famous post-Tour criterium, which is the furthest part of the hexagon of France that the riders actually come to. After the Tour de France, it seemed a few years ago as if these exhibition races were starting to die out. But in fact, the one here in Cayon has been very heavily supported over the years. And in fact, a couple of years ago, I remember Jamaluddin Abdoujaparov winning down here on this little criterium circuit. It's always held right in the centre of town, which is quite fortunate for the bike riders, because Cayon is in a valley, and as soon as you go a couple of kilometres out of town, straight uphill.
And the man who lives here, Thor Hushovd, he's in this breakaway of 10 riders, just over 6 minutes at the moment. So he will know these roads better than most. Like it was like when Stuart O'Grady was in the breakaway down into Toulouse, where Stuart lives when he's not in Australia. He knew all of the roads and was rather upset that Juan Antonio Flecha got clear and won the day, because it ruined his perfect day.
It's still the red train of Team Saeco on the front, setting all of the pace making, and they'll be leaving a lot of energy in this chase away right now, Phil. And if their man is going to finish it off, he will have to say a great big word of thanks to his teammates, because they are doing a splendid job. But they're not really eating into the advantage very quickly of the 10-man breakaway, because it's come down from 8½ minutes to 6 minutes 14 seconds, and it's taken them around about 25 kilometres to do that.
Well, they got away at 22 kilometres after a series of attacks and an incredibly fast start. Finally, 10 riders were allowed to move clear of the peloton, and they did 45 kilometres in the first hour, which is really rapid when you know what lies ahead at the end of the stage today. The last 40 kilometres are desperately hard, but they got away and they've built a lead. As Paul said, at one moment it was 8½ minutes. It's come back to 6:14. They've still got 74 kilometres to go, so a long way still to ride, and still really 2 hours of racing here as they come up towards the finish, because the last climb, the first category, Porte de Payer, we haven't been there for years. I don't think I've ever been over that climb. It's only the second time it's been in the Tour de France. Well, way down, don't forget, in the far south of France now, running on the shark's teeth of the Pyrenees, which separate France from Spain, and right in the middle, a lovely little principality of Andorra. When they go there, they climb over the giant col de Porte d'Envalira, which is a massive 28-kilometre climb, but not as hard as some of the climbs they're going to face in the next few days here on the French side of the Pyrenees. It's a valley race for a long, long way, and then, as I say, they enter into the valley as they head down towards Aix-en-Firme, and then they'll go up the big climb of the Port de Paillere at top that at 29 kilometers from the top, then down to Aix-les-Thermes itself, and then they'll climb about 9 kilometers to the finishing line. And it's steep in places. It won't be terribly decisive, but it'll be hard enough.
What'll give us another sort out, I'm sure, and the Spanish riders will certainly be trying to show off their wares as the best climbers in the world, because we're just right up on the border of Spain here, which is why I think we'll see the Spanish riders go on the attack on the first climb, and that could be good for Armstrong if the rumour is true that was emanating through race radio at the moment, that Jan Ullrich is suffering from an intestinal problem. Ivan Parra at the back seems to be having a mechanical problem. He keeps looking down at his machine, and he really needs to be looking up to the summits, because that's where we're going. Away from Quillon, we will begin to climb this very difficult climb. Well, Ivan Parra at the back end of the main group there, Phil, will be looking at his bike to ascertain if he does have a problem, and if he needs the mechanic to come up alongside and help him out. Now, if he does, he will put his hand into the air, and the race referee will then call out the name Kelme over the race radio, and the team car of Kelme will come forward alongside the rider and see if they can repair the problem on the move. Now, if they can't, what they'll do then is decide to change the bikes, and all of the cars that are following the race right now carry up to 6 machines, and of course they carry up to 5 pairs of wheels as well, and usually there's a pair of wheels in the team car ready to jump out and swap them over.
72 kilometers to go. Rick Verbrugge, by the way, sporting a bandage on his right elbow, fell off before he got into this breakaway today. Hasn't had any effect. And good tempo riding. There's the man who lives here in town, Thor Hushoff from Norway, the only Norwegian rider in the break, and he has a big press following here. The Thor now is really heading into the Pyrenees. We'll take another break here on OL. And welcome back, as the riders are now on the edge of going into the Pyrenees for the very first time here on the 13th stage of the Tour de France, the 14th day, of course. Now, Lance Armstrong is the man in the yellow jersey. Some would say, as usual, he's won the last 4 tours, and we're able to look back now with Subaru as we feature Lance Armstrong in his Tours de France. Of all Lance's Tour wins, perhaps 2002 is the most undefined. He'd proven his champion's pedigree, and with Jan Ullrich out of the picture, there were questions as to who would challenge him. With another prologue win, Armstrong offered the challenge out to anyone who could take it, and it seemed as though a whole team answered. Once. Igor Gonzalez de Galdeano took over the early race lead after the team time trial, holding it through the first individual time trial, as Lance Armstrong suffered a rare loss in the race against the clock. As the race in the Pyrenees, Once passed the duty of challenging Armstrong to Joshua Bolocchi. But as strong as the Spanish squad were, Lance and the entire US postal team matched at every move. Most memorable were the efforts of Roberto Heras, as he carried Lance to 2 stage wins and the yellow jersey in the Pyrenees. But Once refused to back down, and they finally singled out Armstrong on the slopes of the Ventoux. Bolocchi went for the kill, but Armstrong answered and left the gasping Spaniard in his wake. This was the killer blow, and for the rest of the race, the US Postal Squad surrounded Lance as he cruised to his 4th straight win. For Lance, he'd come to define the 2002 win as the team win. Well, sadly, no Joshua Bolocchi in the Tour now after that very bad crash he had going into Gap, but there seems to be plenty of other riders wanting to attack Lance Armstrong this time around. 5 minutes, 6 minutes the gap at the moment. It's been sort of the same now for quite a lot of kilometres, so quite clearly the peloton is relying very heavily on the hills ahead to reduce the gap. They are going down towards the mountains now, pretty much at a standard 6 minutes, which they've been for quite a few kilometres.
Well, they've got about 20 kilometres of flat now before they get to the start of the climb in earnest. They go through that very interesting town of Axat and then to Gessé, and from there they will begin their ascent of the climb. And Phil, I've been looking through all of the history books trying to find out whether or not the Tour has actually been over the Port de Paillere before, and I actually can't find it anywhere, although I was listening to Cyril Guimard, the great French commentator and former team manager of Lance Armstrong with the French Cofidis team, and he said the Tour had been over it once before, but a lot of the riders will know the climb because they actually use it in training camps when they come down here to the high altitude training area of Fort Romeu.
Well, I must confess, I certainly don't remember it in the 30 years I followed the Tour de France, but I was relying heavily that Cyril Guimard was right, because people like Lance Armstrong have been down and checked out these climbs. The climbs they don't know, Lance is so thorough, he's been in the area and ridden the climb, so it might prove to be decisive too today, because at least he'll know when the top is coming. You know, if you're having a bad time on the climb, you keep coming round corners and seeing the road still going up into the sky, then that really works on the mind. And if you know that it's 3 more corners to the top, then you know, I'll just keep it going and I'll make it.
I also think it's very important to check out the descents as well, because the descents can be important. If you have a hard time, you can pull yourself back into the race. At the start of today, though, Armstrong is still undisputably the leader of the Tour de France by 34 seconds from Jan Ullrich. Vinokourov rode, I thought, a superb time trial yesterday.
Brilliant.
He lost a bit of time, and he's still in 3rd place in the overall classification within a minute of Lance Armstrong. And Tyler Hamilton, well, there have been so many compliments about this man. He's in 4th place, 2:59 in arrears, but the climbers did take a big pasting yesterday. Zubeldi, the best of the climbers, 4.5 minutes behind, as was his teammate Iban Mayo. It's really starting to open up the gaps between the men at the top and the men who can challenge on the uphill stages.
Yes, they don't have the big upper body power for the long time stretches of the race, but put them on the mountains, they just run up them like rabbits because they are so light. And they're looking to get their own back today. Still 73 kilometers to go at Belviane, but once we get onto the climb, which we're all very interested to see when it comes our way, the Porte de Paillier, that'll come on at about 35 kilometers to go. Well, there we are. As we trace down the Ariège, the river there on the left, the peloton still moving very, very quickly as the Tour continues its journey today into the Pyrenees. We'll take another short break. Rejoin us on OLN. Welcome back. The lead is still on today's stage of the Tour de France here on OLN. 6 minutes and 13 seconds as we glance down at some of the beautiful chateaux which abound here, just tucked under the shadow of the Pyrenees. 64.8 kilometers to race, and Team Seiko still driving the bunch, and we don't know why. Looks like Fabio Sacchi might be on the front here. Funnily enough, Paul, he's the best placed rider in the Seiko team, and that was never anticipated.
Well, it wasn't at all, but I think Gilberto Simoni probably overestimated on his powers of recuperation from the Giro d'Italia to the Tour de France. And before the start, he was one of the riders who was very vocal on how he was going to destroy Lance Armstrong in the mountains. We do know that he is a brilliant climber. He's won some great mountain races throughout his career. But I think after probably digging into his energy reserves during the Giro d'Italia, he didn't quite have the same form at the start of the Tour de France, and he's certainly not going to rock Lance Armstrong's foundations in the race for the overall classification.
If you're just joining our programme, let me remind you, 2 riders didn't start. One rider didn't start, Pietro Cauchioli. 2 riders were eliminated in the time trial yesterday, David Echeverria and Unai Echeverria. Not related, in fact, come from 2 different countries, one from South America and one from Spain. And on the road today, the loss of Danilo De Luca. He has abandoned, leaving us in a situation of 163 riders still in the Tour as we now enter the Pyrenees for the first time. The big thing, Paul, is 3 enormously tough days, a day off, and then we still stay in the Pyrenees as we run away. Most unusual format.
A lot of mountains in the Tour de France this year. We had 3 tough days in the Alps, a race across the southern part of France, and that race across the southern part of France has fatigued many of the riders because the temperatures have been phenomenal. It has to have been the hottest Tour for many, many years. And yesterday we were looking at a temperature which exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle part of the afternoon for the time trial, and that could explain some of the huge time gaps. The rider who is the champion of the world in the individual time trial, Santiago Botero, did a fairly fine performance in 10th place, Phil, but he was 5 minutes behind.
That's enormous. Of course, Ullrich himself was once the world time trial champion, but 5 minutes is a huge amount to take out of a rider in equivalent of, what, 47 kilometers, 30 miles. The weather again is hot in the valleys. It's estimated at 91 degrees. It'll cool a little bit, but then the pressure will go on because of the climbing.
But strangely enough, at the summit of the climbs here in the Pyrenees, the weather has not cooled down. In the Alps, we were finding a temperature of 30, 35 degrees Celsius, around about 85 to 90 degrees in the valleys, and it was cooling at the mountain summits. But right here at the finish line at the moment, it's almost 85 degrees Fahrenheit as well. These riders being subjected to a very hot Tour de France this year.
Normally in the Pyrenees, it can become very chilly. I've commentated from these ski stations with overcoats on and blankets around my legs, and we're sat here now in extremely warm conditions. Of course, one clever commentator said, well, of course it's warmer, you're nearer the sun.
Yeah, well, he didn't factor in the altitude, but anyway, that's beside the point. These are the leaders right now. Rick Verbrugge will be looking for a victory for Lotto Domo, who have not really had a very successful campaign in the Tour de France this year. They've been trying to get Robbie McEwen up for a stage win, and I think the fact that McEwen has been concentrating on trying to win the points jersey, he's actually lost an edge on his speed, Phil, going forward to try and win the individual stages.
This peloton is holding a very fast tempo here without killing themselves, and they're all allowing Seiko to set the tempo. So it's clear to us, well, it is clear to us that Simone is going to wait till the lower slopes of this first category climb and launch an attack. That can be the only reason that Seiko are working, unless, which is totally against the rules, they formed a combine with another team in the race, and that will become clearer later. But of course, very difficult for the race referees to prove such a combine. But if it were to be proved, those riders will be disqualified from the race.
Well, I actually can't believe that is happening right now, because Gilberto Simone is an hour and 2 minutes behind Armstrong in the overall classification. Now, if he was to attack at around about 2 or 3 kilometers from the summit of this penultimate climb, the Porte de Paillere, when it kicks up to around about 10%, Armstrong is not going to chase him down at all. He's going to let him go because he's no threat in the overall classification. If Simone can go over the summit of the climb with a minute advantage, he will take advantage of that on the descent, because he's a bit of a nutcase going downhill. He descends exceptionally well. We've actually seen him win races at the bottom of mountains towards the end.
The peloton there, still the Seiko boys. They've lost 2 riders on their team now, with De Luca going out today and Stefano Zanini losing it just towards the end of his Alpine journey. But they are keeping this pressure on at the moment, and nobody, of course, willing to take up the chase. Why should they, when they've got a team doing all of the work? Lance Armstrong has so far got himself again into the driving seat of the Tour de France, but it's all about time, and he is still that fragile few seconds ahead of Jan Ullrich and Alexander Vinokourov, but he is still the maillot jaune of the Tour.
Well, it's a strange situation, really, because Armstrong has found himself in the yellow jersey without actually ever having to attack so far. He's just remained consistent. He's used his team to an absolute and utter maximum, and he conquered the yellow jersey really thanks to the ride that the team did in the team time trial. They won that after trying to win it ever since they came to the Tour de France, and it was a moment of pleasure, I think, for Lance Armstrong. He in fact admitted that before he retired from the sport, he had so much wanted to win the team time trial in the Tour de France.
Well, it's easy for the riders getting through nice on the right there, but the following cars, they've got a bit more of a tricky situation here. So they all go away. Just sat at the back of the race here too is one of the Gerolsteiner riders, and this looks like Marcus Seberg in the breakaway. It is dropping back just to check out things.
So just going through that town there, I wonder if that wasn't the area where Bigfoot was last spotted.
Well, he should ride up to the break, no problems. They've still got just on 6 minutes. Well, don't forget, if you're enjoying OLN's coverage of the Tour de France, and I bet you are, then join Bob Roll on Thursday night for all of the latest news and highlights in the world of cycling and multi-sport. And that will be when Summer Sports Zone returns on August the 7th, only on OLN, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. That one, enjoy it with Bob. The beauty of the Pyrenees, if you're not a rider in the Tour de France, we're heading that way. We'll be back very soon.
And you're watching exclusive coverage of Stage 13 of the 2003 Tour de France here in France. Thanks for tuning in to OLM. And we're going to get back to the action in Stage 13 and with Phil Liggett and Paul Sherwen in just a few minutes. But right now, I want to talk to Bob Roll about Lance Armstrong and his lead going into the Pyrenees. This is the smallest amount of a lead that he has had going into the second set of mountains. Why is that?
Well, it's true that it only has a 34-second advantage over Jan Ullrich, and historically we've seen Lance have 7 minutes and 44 seconds
Wow.
the first time he won the Tour over Alano after the first set of mountains going into the second set. Sometimes the Tour starts the mountains with the Alps, sometimes with the Pyrenees. This year, the Alps came first. You can see 4:55 over Ullrich in 2000, even 4 minutes, 21 seconds over Blackie in last year's Tour before the second set of mountains. That gives you a pretty big cushion when you are going into the second set of mountains. You can change your tactics totally, and Lance reluctant to attack once he's built up the big lead. But when he hasn't had the lead, he has not been reluctant to attack at all. After the first time he won the Tour, people said there was a lot of stories about the lack of rivals. None of the big riders from the previous years were in that Tour. So Lance really motivated by revenge in that Tour de France. He was so focused on his training. The year after that, it was because they had returned and Lance wanted to beat them and prove them wrong again. And always Lance has been motivated by revenge, he hasn't shown that. He hasn't turned one pedal in anger so far this year, and if anything, he seemed too relaxed in the interviews he's done throughout the Tour so far, leading up to the race even, and now we see such a close margin. I'm wondering if he hasn't lost that edge that he always has had, a really hard, sharp edge that he's used to demolish his rivals. He seems to be a very contented bike racer so far, and after the time trials, the first time I've seen him do anything in anger, throwing his helmet down, pushing his bike aside. He seemed to be genuinely upset. So I think if he can get that in these 3 days, he's going to, one, need it, and two, use it to demolish his rivals.
And talking to fans, too. Everybody's divided whether he's lost that edge or not. All right, thank you, Bob Roll. Now let's get back to the action in stage 13. Phil, Paul, take it away.
Thanks, Kirsten. Thanks, Bob. I think Bob's absolutely right there, but don't let's write Lance out of this script, for goodness sake, because he is in the yellow jersey and he is a fighter, and I hope he wins the Tour, because he'll look back and it'll be the greatest Tour he's ever won of all 5. He is being challenged, and that's what we all want to see, of course. A good race. Anyway, let me tell you just moments ago there why Bob was talking away. It was a bit of a rough ride for Robbie McEwen, because watch the left-hand side of your picture, about 10 men up. There goes Robbie into the rough stuff and down. And I'm happy to say not out. He hurt his right elbow. Watch him just look at his elbow there to see how it is. And then he gets his bike out of the ditch and quickly away again. And he's currently chasing back. As far as we know, he hasn't got back yet. But the peloton, I think it will be okay. This isn't Robbie, this is Sandy Cassar, who is having a very rough day today. And I think being lucky to stay in the Tour. Showing a lot of brave moments today, Sandy is. Cassar is facing a very rough ride now, Paul, because these roads are going to tip up very shortly. I don't think he'll lose enough time to be eliminated with the hills coming so close to the finish, but I'm just wondering how wise he is to continue at this stage.
Well, he's a Frenchman, and the Tour de France is the biggest thing on the French calendar, and it is so very difficult to actually abandon the Tour. If he gets eliminated, it's slightly easier, psychologically, to accept it, but he's still going to have a hard time getting his body over this mountain pass right now, because it is a long climb. It's 15 kilometers of ascension. That's 10 miles and an average gradient of about 8%. And
Quite steep.
when the lights go out, it's very hard to keep going.
Yes, and the thing about the Pyrenean hills, they tend to be steeper than the Alpine passes. They are a different range of mountains. Riders can pass through the Alps better sometimes than through the Pyrenees, or indeed vice versa. But you don't go diving into the Pyrenees with great confidence because you've had a wonderful Alpine journey. It doesn't always work out that way. The body is changing another week down the road in what is a 3-week race. Well, we're looking now at the leaders of the race. The latest check we've got is 5 minutes and 28 seconds, so they're not really bringing them back. I'm sure that they're going to allow the terrain to end the ambitions of most of the riders in this breakaway. But there are 1 or 2 good climbers in this group who will try to push on alone, and watch out for Laurent Brochard, Alvaro Gonzalez de Galdiano. Those are the riders who might start going for gold when the climb gets steep. That's about 2,000 feet above the Tour de France, and my helicopter camera, which brings us these wonderful pictures of the Tour de France as it makes its way around France through the Pyrenees today. We'll take a short break. Rejoin us here on OLN. And welcome back to the Tour de France. The leaders at least have now started the climb at the Porte de Paillere. They've just started. It's very shallow in the beginning, while the peloton are running at 5 minutes and 15 seconds behind the 10 men of the day. Robbie McEwen still trying to get back into the peloton, but doesn't seem too badly injured. There they are. These are the men now on the lower slopes of the climb, and the big news for the US Postal boys, Jose Luis Ribiera, the best placed in this breakaway, 17 minutes behind his team captain Lance Armstrong, while everybody else in this breakaway has lost more than an hour. So this is a good move for US Postal, a chance to leapfrog another rider up the overall classification. Now, let us continue our look at the young and up-and-coming riders, thanks to Infinity, accelerating the future. We've chosen today, Jörg Jatz, who was up in the top 10 until he had to stop with his fallen rider, Josiva Bolocki, coming into gap. He's one of the great workers of the team, though. He's 26 years of age. He celebrates his birthday in a couple of days' time on stage 16. In fact, he's been a pro now for 7 years, but he has never won a race. Yet he is a recognizable face in the peloton because everybody knows what great ability he has. He is a rider who could have finished very high up in this year's Tour de France if he hadn't stopped for his fallen team leader, Bolocki, because he plummeted out of the top 10 because he waited there for 4 minutes. Peloton still big tempo riding coming from Seiko. We're expecting today an attack from Gilberto Simoni. 5¼ minutes, still what, 32 miles, 53 kilometers to go, but we're getting to the point now where it's virtually all uphill. We've started the climb, shallow at first. Yes is the town that the peloton are heading to now. The leaders are through it, and we think that this climb might be very, very decisive.
Well, it really begins once they get to the town of Usson-les-Bains. That's when they have the 15-kilometer measured climb. But it is a very difficult stage. The finish from Toulouse at the start, the first 60-odd miles, was actually very flat. But the Col de Paillere, I'll be interested to see what it looks like, Phil, because it climbs up for 15.5 kilometers and an average gradient is 7.8%. But there are 1 or 2 portions of it near the summit which kick up to 10% in gradient. And that is where I think we will see the attacks. And if Gilberto Simoni is on form from Team Seiko, that's probably the area that he's got marked off in his race handbook.
Well, just look at the forest side of the Pyrenees here. Might get a chance to see one of the Pyrenean vultures here, because they were released here a few years ago and now breeding very well indeed. And I'm sure our helicopters will pick them up as they again pay their yearly visit to the riders of the Tour de France. This breakaway has been very, very sensible in the way it has ridden today. On the flat, it pushed up to 8.5 minutes. As we've approached the mountain, it's ridden very, very steadily. As far as we know, we've got no passengers. They've been working pretty much together. Carlos de Cruz has been trying to do his job for his Green Points jerseyed leader Baden Cook at the sprints. He got second place at both of them, but he was beaten by Thor Hushovd on both occasions there, and that means Hushovd is up to 3rd overall in the points competition. Here is Ribiera, usually always riding at the side of Lance Armstrong. Clearly today Lance has said, try and get in a move, try and confuse the enemy, and he's only 17 minutes off the race lead. If it stays away, and he's a great climber, remember, he could be finishing first today, and he could be moving into the top 10.
Well, it's obviously the tactical talk this morning in the room of US Postal Service. They were told to put riders into the leading breakaway, and which was sure to happen because with the long flat part of the course, about 62 miles before the first climb of the day, there were going to attacks come out immediately. The gun went off, and Armstrong has got a couple of riders up in the high placings in the overall classification. One of them is Roberto Heras. He's 11th overall, and I'm sure he was given the orders to look for the breakaways alongside Manuel Beltran, who himself was 13th overall. The gap is starting to come down, and that's because we're meandering up the valley right now, and although it is uphill, this is not part of the measured climb of the Porte de Paillere. They've 10 kilometers or so to go along this valley road before they start the final 15-kilometer ascent to the 2,000 meter altitude of the Porte de Paillere. And at the back, Robbie McEwen is back in the main field.
Yeah, so McEwen is back. Let the climbs begin. This is the rear of the peloton at the moment, and McEwen got back pretty quickly there. Well, the climbs may not have officially started, but tell the riders that As the Tour de France continues, we'll take a break on OLN. And welcome back to the Tour de France. We're now beginning steadily the climb of the first category mountain, the Porte de Payer. Not officially on the slopes yet, but it's all uphill from here on. And this is Pierrick, who's being dropped here from the back, from the Crédit Agricole, Pierrick Fedrigo. He's in trouble now. We had an unfortunate incident, and here he comes going past him now. It's Nicolas Fritsch of the FDJ.com team trying to get back on. He just punctured both tyres, can you believe, in a bizarre puncture. Must have gone down a hole in the road, and snake bite punctures on both wheels, so he had to change both wheels at the same time. Well, it's steady up the valley now as we climb up towards the top of the Porte de Payer. It's not officially started, by the way, yet. It's a 15-kilometre climb when it does start, but at the moment it's the gentle ascension towards it. Latest time check is 4 minutes and 41 seconds, and that's on the 10 riders. We are 48 kilometres from the finishing line right now, 149 since we started. So that breakaway has been in the lead now for 127 kilometres, a long time, and it's still all Seiko on the front. And it can only be to launch Gilberto Simoni into the attack when they feel the time is right, because they've got no reason to chase. In fact, because they've made such a high speed, they ejected from the race their own teammate Danilo De Luca. He got left by the peloton and he abandoned the race about an hour and a half ago.
Well, they seem to be slowing down the pace now. We're getting to the early slopes of this very difficult climb, and it is, once we get to the summit, around about 3 kilometres to go, it kicks up to 10%, and I'm pretty sure that's when we'll see the attacks coming from the climbers. There are so many different kinds of climbers in the world of bike racing. There are climbers who can climb with sheer power, and that's what Jan Ullrich will try and do, use the power that he's got in the lower part of his back and his thighs to use a big gear on the climbs. Or climbers like the Spaniards and like Gilberto Simoni, who have got the incredible knack of being able to accelerate on the climbs. And I think that is the advantage that Lance Armstrong might have over Ullrich on the final climb of the day up here to the Plateau de Bonastre. And in fact, last time the Tour came here in 2001, Armstrong dished out a 23-second advantage over Jan Ullrich, and that 23 seconds is something that is looking very important in the Tour de France at the moment, because Armstrong only leads Ullrich by 34 seconds.
So the peloton still driven by the boys in red, and I see the Cofidis boys sitting there at the back. I'm not sure who that is underneath the hat there, but he's obviously some celebrity enjoying the race today.
Well, at least he's got himself covered up against the sun, because the temperature today has been quite remarkable. Pretty much up to around about 95 degrees Fahrenheit on the flatter part of the course, and it really hasn't chilled down that much as we get towards the summit of these climbs. The humidity's not too bad, though, in this part of the world, because it's down to 33% after being well up towards 50 as we were in the area around Toulouse. And it is sunny, but there are a few clouds starting to appear on the horizon, and we always have to be aware of that here in this part of the world, because it's strange how the thunder clouds can come in quite quickly towards the end of the afternoon.
Well, the breakaway here being driven on by Carlos da Cruz, who's ridden a good race. He annoyed Stuart O'Grady, though, on the road into Toulouse, because he accused him of being a spoiler of the breakaway. And he was doing all he could to stop Stuart O'Grady getting the points for the green jersey of his team leader, Baden Cook, and he did that very well indeed. And he's back in another breakaway today. He's looking like he's going to have a very strong end to this year's Tour de France. 4:38, the latest check we have at the moment. Everybody passive in that main field, nobody shouting at us on race radio. Still Seiko doing all of the work.
Well, Stuart O'Grady can't complain too much about the work done by Carlos da Cruz. He will have been riding to team orders, and team orders were finish in front of Stuart O'Grady on any possible moment that you can, because after all, Baden Cook from Carlos da Cruz's team is the leader of the points competition, and that's an unbelievably close competition right now, and the Aussies are all over the top end of that classification, with Cook leading McEwen, and O'Grady today, because of Hushov's presence in this leading group, has dropped down from 4th into 5th. Guys getting themselves organised right now. Verbrugge. Verbrugge's had a fairly quiet tour this year, really, Phil. He's
that was very polite of you to say it that way. He's had a very quiet tour.
The team itself has had a very quiet tour, and I was actually talking to Mark Sargent before the start, the team manager, and he blames it all on Robbie McHugh. And he said if a team leader is firing, the whole morale of the team just comes up a certain amount, and it's really a question of the whole team starts to feed on success.
Well, Verbrugge has ridden the Tour 6 times and hasn't finished it since the year 2001. As we're watching the riders signal here from, I think it's Da Cruz there, who's waving for some help from the car behind as the breakaway stays away. It's 4:36. The battle is still ahead. We'll take a break. Welcome back. The Tour de France now beginning to get on to the slightly steeper slopes of the Porte de Paille. We haven't started the official sector of the climb yet. The gap, though, is still at just over 4 minutes. Anyway, while we look at the peloton here, and the Seiko boys are running out of men at the front right now. As you know, we've had a number of crashes in this year's race, and many of them serious, taking the riders out of the race. So we're going to ask Frankie Andreu now to update us on those riders.
It's the first day of the Pyrenees, and if we look back toward the first half of the Tour, there's some notable riders that had some serious injuries. Boloki, who had that nasty crash in the descent with Lance Armstrong, he broke his femur. 2 days ago, he had to have surgery to help get that fixed. He's out for the rest of the season. On the very first day, 2 Rabobank riders got taken out. Mark Lotz did an endo over the handlebars, smashed his cheekbone. He also went in to have surgery to get his cheekbone fixed. Levi Leipheimer, he's doing okay. He's still on crutches, even though it's 12 days after that first stage crash. Problem is, a couple days ago, he had an x-ray, a sonogram. He has a huge hematoma on his abductor muscle, and that's what's giving him a lot of problems. 2 days ago, he also tried to ride the bike. He got permission to start trying to ride. He could only ride 10 minutes because it was so painful. Then yesterday, he tried riding again, and he was able to get up to like 30 minutes, so he's doing better. Levi has totally switched his concentration now towards the Vuelta and the World Championships. Also, Levi gave me an insight on today's stage. The first mountain climb. It's categorized first category, but he says for sure it should be an Ors category climb. It's definitely going to break up the riders. He says it's as hard or harder as the Col d'Izoard. So Levi might be home watching this on TV, but we are going to be in for one exciting race here today as we enter into the Pyrenees to see how Jan Ullrich, Lance Armstrong, Tyler Hamilton, and all these riders handle the first day going into the mountains.
Thanks, Frankie. Well, I think the riders might be agreeing with you here. They've just hit the climb. It started about 500 meters ago. Immediately, Marcus Zuberg has launched an attack and has been joined by a few of the breakaway. So, Paul, they're saying, you know, they've given this a first category tag, but ex-bike riders saying this should be what they call an Or category. They say it is very, very hard.
Well, I think it's very unfair of the organisation to classify it as just a 15-kilometre ascent, because I make it a 10-kilometre ascent before they actually get to the foot of the climb. Yeah. It's rated as a first category climb. It's 15.2 kilometres in length over the measured part of the climb, and the average gradient is 8%. But it is a beast, you know, because when we get to the top, it kicks up to 10% at a couple of times. This is interesting, though, Phil, here to see the move coming from Marcus Zuberg. He was in the leading group of 10. I've never really regarded him as a mountain climber, no. But possibly it's a different situation being in a 10-man breakaway.
Well, Rubiera's also bridged the gap to him. He had to chase him down, but he's got up to him. This is Bertolini. He's dropping back from the breakaway now. He's more a fast finisher than a mountain climber in the sprints, and it looks now as though they really have split this field up now. Well, this is the teammate of Laurent Brochard who's going back at the moment, Ludovic Terpin. And I think Brochard, for my money, could do a good ride today. We're starting to just cross them off now as they come back from this breakaway. This was to be expected, but as Paul Sherwen has said, we really didn't expect the first attack to come from Marcus Zuberg, the Swiss rider.
Also going back now as well, Carlos da Cruz, his job done for the day. He's tried to rival Thor Hushovd in the intermediary sprint classifications, but he's not too worried at all. He will just think about surviving over this climb, and he'll get a chance to see the front runners from the main field coming up shortly. One man who hasn't split off the back yet right now is, well, as I say that, he is starting to slip backwards. The man there wearing 44, former two-time champion of the world, Oscar Ferreira, trying to race into Spanish soil or towards Spanish soil today in the leading group. This man as far as I'm concerned, is a brilliant bike rider. He's a long way down in the overall classification, an hour and 21 minutes back. But when it comes down to the stage finishes, this man has got an incredible turn of speed. And if he hadn't been dogged by injury, Phil, throughout his career, he'd have been probably 10 times better.
Absolutely, but he's not really had a great tour either. Marcus Zuberg, who started the attack only in his second Tour de France. He rode his first tour in the year 2000, and he's waited a while to get back in again. But I have to say, it could be a great move this for Rubiera if he starts to continue there. This is the back of the race now, with the brioche riders are also being dropped off here. I'm wondering if this is Sylvain Chavanel.
Well, they've had a hard time, and in fact their team manager won't be very happy either, Phil, in the early part of the evening, because he would be very disgusted that they hadn't made the split. It is Sylvain Chavanel going out at the back there, and he was a man tipped
right
before the tour as a top 10 finisher.
He's in
there
a high
is
position,
Botero.
and Botero also going out of it. This is the carnage at the back of the race now. Remember, we had the start of the day. 10 riders got clear after 22 kilometres. They've stayed away to the slopes here of the Porte de Paille, which we are hearing now is actually a very severe climb, and the riders who know it might advantage here because the breakaway is split immediately by an attack by Marcus Zuberg. And we haven't got a camera up there just now, but we have seen that Rubiera has joined here. Now this is the breakaway group here at the front. Gonzalez de Galliano is the third rider there. Laurent Brochard has got up there as well. I think we expected that.
Well, Brochard is a good rider in a breakaway like this. He's not one of the top climbers able to rival the Spaniards, but it's good to see as well Rick Verbrugge digging deep here to try and make contact with the four men who are forming at the front end of the peloton. This is the kind of move that you would expect from a guy like Brochard. He's not able to accelerate on the climbs, but look at this. In fact, Ulrich has taken over responsibility now. Let's see if Armstrong can respond to this one.
Well, this is most interesting now, because Lance Armstrong may not have expected Ulrich. Again, the rumours emanating that Ulrich had a stomach problem. Lance has come up. Ulrich has looked over his shoulder, seen the maillot jaune of Armstrong alongside him. This is beginning to look a very interesting start to the climb to me, because Ulrich has called up his team. There are 3 of them here now. Armstrong must be a little concerned about this.
Well, he's responded immediately. He's right onto the wheel of Jan Ulrich. Let's not discount the team of Ulrich either. Team Bianchi have only lost 1 rider so far, Tobias Steinhauser. He was one of the riders more expected to perform in the sprints, but he has got a host of very good climbers in his team. Look at the field disintegrating here on this climb, which is only ranked as a first category. In fact, it's in my estimation, Phil, I count it as being 25 kilometres long. And these guys at the back, dude, there's a lot of blue jerseys slipping back through the peloton as well. The jerseys of Lance Armstrong's teammates. Now, that's a big surprise.
But this is an extremely steep climb. It averages 8%. It is a very hard climb. And Ulrich is now clearly told his men to let's test Armstrong again and see just how strong he is. Now, Alexander Vinokurov is there in that pink jersey, riding beautifully in 4th wheel just now. So I think our cameras might concentrate here, and you'll have to just we'll have to just look at the computer as to what is happening amongst the riders up front. Remember, nobody ahead of this group can lead the Tour de France today. They've lost too much time. This is the race today for the yellow jersey. Briefly up front, it looks as though Laurent Brochard is also getting himself in the action here with Gonzalez de Galliano.
Don't forget, this is Alvaro Gonzalez de Galliano, not Igor Gonzalez de Galliano.
He's not riding.
He's not riding. He's suffered a broken collarbone before the start of the Tour. Gonzalez de Galliano here, number 114. In fact, is previously a winner of a stage of the Tour of Spain, Tour of Italy, I should say. And Chechu Rubiera, well, he's just sitting there now. If the race accelerates behind and they do catch this leading group, Armstrong once again has the tactical advantage of having a teammate up the road. It looks now as if Ulrich has given the word to his men to shut off the pacemaking. He just wanted to test the waters, maybe, to see if anybody was in difficulty. Well, the men at the back certainly are.
He's completely shattered the peloton here. That is becoming a very, very select group. That was Roman Weinstein's ex-world champion. All the Kelme climbers are in trouble as well. This is going to be a superb climb now of this mountain. Well, the climb is really beginning to bite. Armstrong again on the defensive as Jan Ulrich is testing him. What a great tour this is. Enjoy it when we return here on OLN. Well, welcome back. We are looking down on a very select bunch. All of a sudden, It has exploded on the climb here of the Porte de Paille. There is still the breakaway in which Checho Rubiera, there he is up amongst the front runners, but behind the peloton is concentrating on Lance Armstrong. Paul, 7 miles still to climb, 12 kilometers, and already we have seen some terrific attacks here. We have seen riders crack. This is still Gonzalez de Galdiano and Roland Brochard setting a fine tempo right up the top end of the climb, but it's at the back where the action really is.
The 2003 Tour de France on OLN is brought to you by Volvo. Volvo for life. And by Power Bar.
Over the last few kilometers, and he wasn't contributing at all to the pacemaking in that leading group of 10. He is a very good climber, and now they're turning on to the slightly steeper part of this course. With 12 kilometers to go to the summit, the race actually levels out just a little bit. The hardest part is at 3 kilometers to go, when it steepens up to 10.5% in altitude. But this is a great move. We are racing towards the frontier of Spain this afternoon, and in fact, looking out from the commentary position, it looks very much as if we're surrounded by Spain.
But Paul, this is such a different race for US Postal now. They've always ridden for Lance Armstrong totally, completely. Yet this year, because of the way they've had to change their tactics all of the time, they've had a race leader in Victor Hugo Peña, and now they are playing a card where a man is free to win the stage when he's not riding for Lance Armstrong as normally he would. They are playing different tactics this year.
Well, there's a lot of different tactics, a lot of good climbers in the race as well. Sastre in a bit of difficulty here from the acceleration of Mercado, and it looks down the road there as if there's another iBernesto.com jersey moving forward. Now it's the turn of Beltran to set up the pacemaking on the front for Lance Armstrong, and I'm surprised to see one man missing from the front line is Roberto Heras.
So am I, and in fact Lance Armstrong is beginning to look a little bit isolated here, and we've still got the finishing climb of 9 kilometers to come. This is taking on a strange shape here as we see the rider Zeberg, who was in the early move, has come back into the group. Remember that overall there's less than a minute covers the first 3 riders in this year's Tour de France. Armstrong, Ulrich and Vinokurov are all in this group. Hamilton is here as well, so too is Zubeldia. These are the cream of the Tour de France, and they are itching to have another go at Lance.
They are all itching, and there's Roberto Heras on the far side. Ivan Basso in the blue and white jersey. He's the best young rider of the Tour de France last year. On the left-hand side there, Zubeldia in the orange jersey. They'll be looking to have some kind of a showdown on the slopes of the mountain up here to Bonascra, because the Spaniards today want to have their day. There are so many Basque flags out on this final climb. They will be cheering their riders all the way to the summit.
This is Michael Bogart here, just about holding on to the back of the train. And I don't think he's going to stay there for very much longer. It looks to me as though he's cracking slowly but surely. Felix Garcia Casas is the rider on Team Bianchi, and this is Acevedo here of Once. These are riders now who will be next to be departed from the back of the train. Bocharov, Alexander Bocharov was the AG2R rider here. This is David Miller now as he makes the right turn onto the steeper sector. Miller, remember, suffering from bronchitis, but trying to improve on his 14th place overall and head up into the elite British cyclists who have had a high finish in the Tour de France. There's not many of them.
It's not a good place to come and try and recover from an illness like that. The Pyrenees, especially at these speeds, many riders going out of the back. This is Hoshoft. He was in that leading group of 10 right now, and he will probably end the day around about 25 minutes behind the leaders. Alvaro Gonzalez de Galdiano has been left behind now by Rubiera. There is Rubiera about 50 meters in front, and today the US Postal Service are in a pretty good situation in the race for the individual stage, but I'm not sure how good the situation is for Lance Armstrong in the rears. He only has left with him Manuel Beltran and Roberto Heras.
Yes, Heras has got back up to his team captain. Been a bit of a struggle, but he's got up there, while Rubiera now is trying to deflect the attention on Lance Armstrong and win the day here, because he was 17 minutes behind Lance overnight. Obviously at the moment he's picking up around about 4 or 5 minutes, but they are closing in very, very rapidly. So Chechu, as he's known, is now trying to get away here and win the day for US Postal. It's a tough call, but at least Armstrong's got 2 riders back with him in the chase.
It's a tough call. He's got 2 men in the chase with him, but if they do accelerate and they close down the gap to Chechu Rubiera. US Postal Service will have 3 men looking after Lance Armstrong at the front, and that could tip the scales into their advantage. The advantage right now over Brochard is about 1.5 minutes, but it's only 2 minutes and 9 seconds back to the main field containing the yellow jersey, Ulrich, and of course Vinokurov.
Rubiera, who's riding only his 3rd Tour de France. He's had great finishes in the service of Lance Armstrong, 22nd and 38th overall. This is Carlos Sastre, who is also making progress up the climb now, ahead of the Armstrong group and riding very, very strongly. But there's an in-fight going on here, and it's all around the rider in the maillot jaune. Others are trying to win the day. These boys are trying now to outwit Lance Armstrong. Beltran leading Armstrong. His eyes firmly fixed there, his jaw set. His eyes are deep in his head. This man is struggling but surviving. Everybody's on the limit.
He's a tough bike rider, though. He's a class act. He's come back from testicular cancer in 1999 when he first won the Tour de France. Nobody could believe it. He's won the Tour de France ever since then, and everyone has said this man is superhuman. He cannot be beaten. But I tell you what, today he's showing the human side of the sport. He is suffering as much as he can to stay in contact with this group. And all of the time, Phil, the guys who are sitting around him are waiting to see if there's any sign of weakness. And if there is, they will take advantage of that without any hint of hesitation at all.
A bit like the look that Armstrong once gave us when it was a fake look on the cols before they climbed Alpe d'Huez a couple of years ago, when he absolutely outwitted Jan Ullrich. But just looking there, Paul, there you've got Manuel Beltran in the service of Lance Armstrong, working his heart out. Beltran, just 8 weeks ago, was on the same team as Jan Ullrich, and Ullrich couldn't hold him going across to US Postal because he couldn't guarantee him a place in the Tour de France, because Jan's team was already going under. It all went right for Jan Ullrich, but now he's sitting behind a man who was once his teammate.
Very strange the way the sport turns around, which is why you must never ever burn your bridges, because you never know what team you're going to end up in. Tyler Hamilton sitting in the middle there, 4th overall. Laurent Dufaux is in the group as well. That's nice to see. Finished twice 4th in the Tour de France. This is Bertolini. He was in the early morning breakaway, which was away for a long time right now, and thanks very much. I think I'll take that.
Through and off, and that's he's going to hang on as best he can. There's still a long way to climb up here. This is the struggle behind the elite in the Tour de France. It's not always a pretty sight as riders struggle just to stay in the race. Our cameras, of course, see mostly the men who are trying to win the race. And right now, to win the day, it could well be Chechu Rubiera. He's still got 5 miles to climb. So Chechu 9 kilometers, or just over 5 miles to go to the summit. This is a great battle again. This tour will not lie down. You won't miss very much. Rejoin us here on OLN very shortly. And welcome back. The battle is still very much on here on this first category mountain. There's still the finishing climb to come, of course, with 37 kilometers to go. And the Armstrong group is still together. Well, our camera's concentrating mainly on the battle of the yellow jersey and the main contenders for final victory in Paris. Still a week and 1 day away. Oscar Freire here now. The man who is making the early pace has dropped through the main field. Here he goes. While tagged on the back there is Jörg Jatsk of the pink jerseyed Once team. You get some idea there, Paul, of just how steep that corner was.
It's a very difficult climb, and as I've said, it's around about 10% once we get up towards the summit. Armstrong still sitting there. It's up to the others to attack him if they want to win the Tour de France. He's the man with the yellow jersey on his shoulders. I think all of these riders exceptionally tired by the long ride across the flat roads from Toulouse down to the foot of the Pyrenees this morning, with temperatures soaring up to almost 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Laurent Dufaux on the left-hand side, just behind Jan Ullrich. In the pink jersey there, you can see Alexander Vinokurov. The rumour emanating that Jan Ullrich is suffering from some kind of an intestinal problem. Tocznik, I think, trying to regain that leading group with the yellow jersey and Lance Armstrong, which indicates, in fact, that the yellow jersey group has slowed down its tempo making.
I think it has. You see the face on Ullrich. He's rubbing shoulders with Lance. They're just riding side by side, pedal rev for pedal rev. And both of them looking okay on the climb, I felt, just there when we saw them moments ago. And I think now there may be a semblance of normality coming in, because the initial surge has only got rid of the other riders while the heads are still all together there. Now these are the legs here of the man out front, I think it is. Yes, it is. Checho Rubiera, and playing a nice card today. He's looking at the board too. We can't see it, unfortunately, but he's giving a very complicated time check because there are cyclists spread right down the mountain right now. And I think very shortly, riding in second and third, will be Carlos Sastre and Mercado. They might well already be up there with Alvaro Gonzalez de Galdiano and Brochard somewhere in there as well.
This man just riding a steady tempo right now. He's allowing the race to take place behind him. If he survives over the summit of the climb, well, then that's a big bonus for him, and he will then start the climb and wait for the return of his team leader. These are the two chasers right now. Carlos Sastre wearing number 78. He's with Juan Miguel Mercado, and these riders have left the group of the yellow jersey. They're trying to toughen up the race and trying to move up a little higher themselves in the overall classification. Sastre is the best placed rider, 16th at the start of the day, 10 minutes 15 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. But more importantly, CSC are the team leading the points classification.
Well, we're looking here now at the riders slowly building again, so the attack has eased that much. You think we're in the United States at the moment, wouldn't you? The American flags flying here as we pass through this little encampment on the slopes. There's Jörg Jatsk having his finest tour, despite the fact he lost 4 minutes standing with his fallen team captain Joshiba Bolocki. He is still very much a contender in this race. He's riding in 19th place overall today.
Looking down this group, though, I can only see Jan Ulrich in this group for Team Bianchi, and he has no more teammates at all left with him.
Has been dropped.
But Heras is there now, moving to the front with Beltran. The team of Armstrong, he has said himself, is the best team in the bike race. They've got 2 men in this leading group, and they've also got a man up the road. So once they catch Rubiera, well, I've got a very good thought that they will have 3 men who will be able to look after Armstrong on the final climb of the day. But it's really going to be just a question of every man for himself. Ulrich is sitting there in his armchair. It's the best seat in the house right now, just to see the performance of Armstrong. He knows he has to do one thing in the Tour de France through these Pyrenees. That's just stay in contact with Lance and then try and beat him in the final time trial.
I have to say, I like the look of Lance again now. He seems to have been caught in that little bad spot, but he's ridden out of it already. He looks very strong at the moment. I think he's taken a lot of confidence in the fact that David Plaza has gone straight through and off the back, and that now it's Ulrich who is isolated just by himself at the head of the field. Jörg Jatsk here, knowing that his teammate Alvaro Gonzalez de Galdiano is still somewhere up the road as we try to sort it out, because here comes Sastre and Mercado. As he comes up on the rider there, it looks like Laurent Brochard. So I think, Paul, there is only Rubiera and Gonzalez de Galdiano in front.
Brochard's suffering right now. We've still got a long way to go to the summit of this climb, around about 4 miles right now. The man we're looking at is the Frenchman Brochard, former champion of the world, a title he won in San Sebastian, Spain back in 1997. So the race situation right now is Rubiera is the leader on the road, ahead of Alvaro Gonzalez de Galdiano, now being chased by Carlos Sastre, who we're looking at just at the top here, and Juan Miguel Mercado of ibenesto.com.
I keep thinking, this is only the first day in the Pyrenees. This Tour de France is not going to lie down. These riders have hit each other as hard as they could, every opportunity they've got, and not just in the mountains, but in the time trials and in that opening week when we go flashish roads up through the north of France. What a wonderful race. But we're seeing at the moment now Carlos Sastre time trialing, Mercado offering no help, and I think, you know, he's going to very shortly pick up this man Alvaro Gonzalez de Galdiano. He has hit the wall as well. Look down below, that's where we're coming from as they S the way up to the summit. This, in all honesty, I think the riders were right. This should have been an ore category climb.
This is a beast of a climb. These guys have been going up it for around about 20 kilometers right now, and there's still, I reckon, about 7 kilometers to go. But Phil, they're riding as if there is no tomorrow in the Tour de France here right now, and the strange thing is there is a very dangerous tomorrow, because there are 4 first category climbs on tomorrow's course, and just for fun, they've thrown in a couple of second categories as well. This is Da Cruz, who's been picked up from the leading group of 10. So he says, take a picture. I want a picture with Lance Armstrong. That's pretty impressive. That
is impressive. He knows his day is done. Carlos Da Cruz there, turning out to be quite a superstar in this year's Tour de France. And good luck to him. We're looking at Jörg Jatsk here now, just slightly being detached from the Armstrong group. That is Vinokurov in the pink jersey, riding on the shoulder of Jan Ulrich. In front of him is Roberto Heras, then Armstrong, man setting the pace, Manuel Beltran. And just in the in the orange jersey there, it looks to me as though we've got Robert Lyseca, might be. This is Lyseca sitting at the back just as we speak. We've also got Zubeldia, and I've seen Iban Mayo. So they've got their big hitters also in this breakaway. Well, it looks, Paul, as though they've all gone to the limit, and that's where we're sticking just now.
They'll have to wait now until they come to the final climb of the day, and I think we'll have a serious showdown there. Lyseca seems to be in a spot of bother here at the back. He keeps looking down at his gears, and that's not a very good situation. When you start looking down there, you're wondering if the gear is just a little bit too hard. And the reason is because the incline has just started to kick up and bite into the legs right now. Armstrong tactically is in a superior condition to everybody else in the race because he has two men in the group with him, and he has a man up the road, and that is Chechu Rubiera. Because when we get to the final climb of the day, if the attacks do start to come, having a teammate alongside means that the teammate can set the pace initially to chase down any of the early attacks. And Armstrong has said, and he continues to say, he has the best team in the world, and he certainly does have. But what a face of concentration.
And here comes the man who haunts him too. That is Carlos da Cruz there. He's taking a bottle, thank you very much, as he continues on his way.
Pretty slick move.
He certainly is. And there is Vinokurov. He looks fine. He's got his dark glasses on today, so everything's rosy for him. Got his red lenses in there. As Beltran, I bet they're glad they bought him now and got him away from Ulrich, because this could have been a very different race. Beltran would have been setting the pace for Ulrich instead of Armstrong. It looks as though Carlos da Cruz slipping away ever so slightly here from the back of the leading breakaway. Remember, he was in the early break that went after 22 kilometres. Rick Verbrugge also going to fall back a little bit now. These are tired men, and I think Lyseca is in trouble, Paul. He's falling off as well.
It's always a bad sign when a rider starts to look down at his gear ratio, because he thinks that it shouldn't really be quite this hard, but it certainly is. We're getting to the area of the climb right now where it kicks up, so around about 8.5%. And Armstrong will take a lot of morale boosting here, Phil, from the fact that he is still surrounded by his teammates. They are dedicated to just one thing in the Tour de France, and that is looking after Lance. But you can see that every opportunity he gets, Jan Ullrich tries to move up alongside Armstrong. This is psychological warfare right now. Ullrich is trying to show Armstrong that he's still fine. And the same reason Armstrong is sitting in second position behind his teammate, to show all the other guys in the group that he has no problems at all. But I think he's really going through all kinds of agony.
He is, but he's proving himself now to be a great champion, because this man has been had everything thrown at him, and here he is still there and still in yellow, and I'm not sure they have much firepower left to throw at him.
Well, Ullrich is out of the saddle right now. A strong bike rider coming up alongside. Just coming onto the shoulder of Armstrong, further up the slope, still leading the race, Chechu Rubiera.
Looking at the lone Chechu now as he ploughs a trail up towards the top of this mountain in a beautiful setting in the Tour de France. But what a battle we have behind as well. We'll continue our coverage of the Tour de France here on OLN. And welcome back, and as you rejoin us, this is Chechu Rubiera of US Postal, who is riding right at the front, a couple of minutes ahead of Lance Armstrong. This is Carlos Sastre now being helped at last by Mercado a little bit further down the slopes, and I think they might pick up the leader, but they are closing in quite quickly. Well, it's not over yet by any means, Paul, because Sastre has now found he's got an ally here. I think it's been a tough job for Mercado to help him, but he seems to have settled in. He's just come by.
Well, to put this all into perspective, these two men are not really dangerous at all to the overall classification of Lance Armstrong, because the best man in that group is Carlos Sastre, and he starts the day over 10 minutes behind in the overall classification. This is what happens when you blow, as this man has done here. Laurent Brochard initially was in the breakaway. He was caught by the yellow jersey group of Lance Armstrong, and very shortly he'll be just surviving on the slopes of this very difficult climb.
Well, I think you're right, but he's going to try and climb his way back up to the cars. A little bit of a traffic block here. Don't forget, we're now on the main climb of the day, which is the Paillere rather, and then once over the top of this, we've got 29 kilometres left to go, and we descend into the valley for the rather nasty 9 kilometres final ascent of 7.2% up the first category climb of the Plateau de Bonasque, which brings us up here to where we're sitting. It's going to be a tough finish to the day, and it's not over yet, because I think Armstrong and Ulrich will have another go at each other.
They will, and mix in with that some very good Spanish climbers who'll be looking to try and get themselves a victory here right on the borders of Spain as well. Sitting on the back of the group is having a hard time this afternoon, Roberto Heras. Here's the leader of Euskaltel-Euskadi, Iban Mayo. He was up to 3rd place in the overall classification before the individual time trial, but a bad ride in that time trial for him has dropped him down to 6th place.
He sat on the back of a really big group at this stage of the race, which indicates to me that perhaps there is a bit of levelling of the race because of the heat. Roberto Heras is clearly not enjoying his day either. He's hanging at the back of this bunch again. He fought back to try and give Lance a hand, but he wasn't able to help him, although he got back. And looking at the face now of Manuel Beltran, it's not going to be much longer before Beltran will have to desist from this fantastic pacemaking. He's done a great job today for Lance. Keep on thinking, though, Paul, how lucky are US Postal, or astute were US Postal, to buy Beltran, because if they hadn't have done so, Lance would have been on his own.
You've got to have your finger on the buzzer all of the time, and how unfortunate it was for Team Bianchi to lose Alex Zuller, because Alex Zuller was on the same team as Jan Ullrich just before the start of the Tour de France, and once the team had all of their financial problems, he jumped across to Team Phonak. Right now, though, Ullrich is just sitting on the wheel of Armstrong, waiting to see whether or not the American can launch an attack and increase the time gap between him and the German, because if Armstrong wants to win this race, I feel that he needs a minute before the final time trial when we go up towards Nantes, and of course he'd feel a lot happier if that gap was a 2-minute one.
Well, that's Mancebo, number 31, Denis Menchov in the white jersey up on the right there. He's the best young rider. He's up to 9th overall in the Tour, and he's still very much in this race today. He might even improve with a bit of luck. One man to watch out for is Laurent Dufaux. He's riding about 5 men down, just peeping in around the shoulders here on the left of Jan Ullrich, because this is just the sort of stage he might profit from today, Laurent Dufaux. But the two big men are riding shoulder to shoulder. It reminds me of the great tours of the 60s when Raymond Poulidor and Jacques Anquetil used to ride similar tactics.
Rubiera's not getting involved in any of that right now. All he's doing is riding at the front end of the main field. He's still holding on to a pretty big advantage over the group containing Lance Armstrong, but this could be the key to the whole race this afternoon. This man has had a fairly easy ride, you know, Phil, coming up to these mountains, because Chechu Rubiera will be fairly fresh on the final slopes of the climb. These are two men who are chasing him right now, Carlos Sastre, and with him is Juan Miguel Mercado of ibanesto.com.
Well, one tactic, Paul, that has to be considered is that Chechu might wait for the arrival of Lance and then be another man to take him away.
Well, that's what I figured is going to happen. He's obviously, for the moment, been told to ride at his own tempo and see how the race behind develops. And I think the reason that will be is they're not quite sure whether or not the attacks are going to happen to Armstrong. They're in a strong tactical situation because they can call that shot when it's needed.
Well, they've ridden it right tactically. All they need are the legs, of course, to put it into being, and now an attack by Laurent Dufaux.
Good call, Phil. Good fall. This man is a long way down in the overall classification. They shouldn't accelerate behind him. He's 17 minutes down in the GC race at the moment, so this is a good move by him, and they won't be worried at all by this man who's having his best day in the Tour de France so far.
Twice fourth in the Tour de France in years gone by. This is probably going to be his swan song to this event, and he's giving it his best shot because he's a very, very fast descender.
And that's what's important about these Pyrenean climbs as well, because once you start to go downhill, the climbs in the Pyrenees are always very technical and always very dangerous, and very often there is no protection barrier at the side of the road, so we will see a rip-roaring descent come down here. Laurent Dufaux right now is looking to go over the summit with a small advantage and then pick up the men who are at the front of the race on the early kilometers of the descent.
So Dufaux has attacked. Beltran is still setting the pace for Lance Armstrong. And we've got Sastre and Mercado now with Rubiera. This is developing into a very interesting final race up to the finish today. Looking across the slope so you get some idea of the gap here. Now, where is Rubiera? Is he just around the corner?
He's not too far away. This mountain road zigzags up to the summit here, a summit which is at 2,000 meters in altitude. Ribiera's just around the corner. Every now and again on the long straights they get a chance just to see where he is. And I think once these two men catch him, he'll sit on the tail of them, because almost certainly they will catch him, because Carlos Sastre is riding an unbelievable tempo right now. And every now and again when the gradient becomes that little bit less, then Juan Miguel Mercado comes forward and helps assist him in trying to pull back the US Postal rider at the front.
Well, this has been an extremely good race today, as we expected. Look down at the slopes now as the whole field split up. This, a first category climb, I think was a mistake by the organisation. There goes Mayo now. Mayo is also needs time on every climb.
And Armstrong has responded. He knows today he wants to go with the climbers. He needs their acceleration to try and put time between himself and Jan Ullrich. And Big Jan and Vinokurov have responded immediately.
They're all right on him here. Well, it's status quo again, but it's good to see that Armstrong is still fighting there. And there's the Spanish flag flying, indicating a headwind too. Mayo looks over his shoulder. Meanwhile, still ploughing a lone furrow to the top of the climb here is Chechu Rubiera. Now, who knows what sort of a plan they talked over the time. And oh, that wasn't Rubiera, that was Heras going back there. Sorry, as life is getting very rough out here.
This is Rubiera right now. He's about to get caught by these two men, and I presume we never saw the passing of Alvaro Gonzalez de Galdiana, because the man who leads the race is there in the blue jersey, and he's about to get caught here by Carlos Sastre and Juan Miguel Mercado. But I think the important thing to remember is, in fact, it looks as if Tyler Hamilton... No, so this is all so confusing right now, because these are the three men who formed up at the front end of the bike race. Everybody's got their jerseys open. Another move coming from the Spanish team, Euskaltel Euskadi, and another acceleration coming from Iban Mayo.
Well, this is what climbers can do. They can kick once, they're active, they kick twice, but again Lance is finding the strength once more. And I can tell you they're clapping these pictures here at the finishing line, because Lance is such a determined bike rider. He has to slow down to get round that steep switchback, and again he has single-handedly neutralized the attack by Mayo.
He actually said on the stage of the Alpe d'Huez he didn't want to follow the acceleration of Mayo, first of all because he knew he wasn't a danger in the overall classification, and secondly because he felt that he may well go too far into the red zone if he tried to stay with him. But right now, today, he's trying to use the acceleration of the Spanish climbers to his own advantage. This is Richard Virenque. He was actually for quite a long time in the group of Lance Armstrong, but right now he is being left behind as well.
Well, we hardly saw Richard today as far as getting the points in that King of the Mountains jersey gone. He's got a 60-point buffer, so he doesn't have to worry too much yet, as he's now beginning to lose ground from Armstrong's group after those two vicious accelerations there by Iban Mayo.
Right, they're slowing down a little bit in the yellow jersey group here of Lance Armstrong, and that has just given Manuel Beltran the chance to recover and get onto the back of the group. And you will see him dig into his suitcase of courage once again here, Phil. He'll ride past the outside of all these riders, go to the front and start setting the tempo again for his teammate. That is what a dedicated domestique is all about.
Well, what an amazing Tour de France. One of the very, very best, this. There are a number of riders really believe they can win the race, and they are going to give it their best shot at every opportunity.
Look at that, Beltran dropped a few moments ago, battling his way back into the race. This is remarkable. So too is Richard Virenque. He was dropped by the acceleration of Mayo, but he too has ridden up to the front. He needs to get himself a few points over the summit of this climb if he can, to try and seal his lead in the overall race for the King of the Mountains competition. Ullrich is looking very good indeed. He's able to get out of the saddle and accelerate as Armstrong does. There's going to be a big showdown, Phil, on the final climb of the day.
But Paul, take a look at the face of Alexander Vinokurov. He is not under any pressure at all, and I reckon he's waiting for the last climb.
Calm and collected. He's responded to all of the accelerations and not shown any of the form that he has got. Now, this is the front of the bike race. These are the leaders now. Carlos Sastre is leading Mercado, and Chechu Rubiera just sitting there, pretty as you please, allowing everybody else to do the pacemaking.
He's catching up with those front runners. Laurent Dufaux here. He's fourth on the slopes now, as far as we can ascertain. Look at the huge crowd, always a good sign. You're nearly at the summit of the climb. He's not going to be on for them, I don't think, before the descent begins, but if he gets over the top, he will catch them on the descent. He is a demon going downhill. This is the elite here. Richard Virenque, desperate for more points in that polka dot jersey, is edging up on the outside. If he sees the banner, he'll sprint clear of the group for the points. That's all he's after for the day. Heras still hanging on. With him is Denis Menchov. And while at the front, Beltran, boy, he's earned a year's salary today.
He's been the best buy of the season for US Postal Service. He's doing a magnificent job for them. They've still got the big tactical advantage, though, of having Chechu Rubiera in front. And Rubiera and the two men with him, Mercado and Carlos Sastre, are only 1 minute 30 ahead of the yellow jersey group of Lance Armstrong.
Well, these are the three coming up for the sprint for the points at the top of the Porte de Payer. And it is Mercado who is setting the pace, followed by Sastre and Chechu Rubiera. There'll be no more work rate now from Rubiera. Now he's been caught. He will ride at the back, and he will hope that Armstrong here, #1, as the winner of the last 4 Tours de France, is now hopefully going to join him on the next climb. Ulrich may have other ideas, so too Vinokourov, and I reckon the 2 Spanish guys too in those orange jerseys will also put in more attacks.
Tyler Hamilton is in this group as well, the man who over the first week was nurturing a double cracked collarbone, and he's still managing to survive in this Tour de France. He's about 8th or 9th in position, but Ivan Basso is in there as well, and these 3 riders now approaching the summit of the climb. It's going to be interesting to see whether Armstrong himself attacks or whether he responds to the attack. He is probably waiting for an attack and assault on victory to come from Alexander Vinokourov, and that is going to be rather strange because Vinokourov in his past tours has always spent his time dedicated to the success of Jan Ullrich, and now Ullrich is his foe.
Just look at the crowd here on the first category climb. Wait till you see the crowd on the finishing climb today, and as we pass through Aix-les-Thermes. Those are the Basque flags of northern Spain, and these are Basque riders in the thick of the action again today.
They've got to be pretty happy with the situation right now. The Tour de France in its centenary year is heading down towards the frontier of Spain, and 3 Spanish riders on the attack and 3 great climbers. Jose Luis Rubiera, who is now not the best place in the overall classification. He's second behind Carlos Sastre, who started the day in 16th place, just 10 minutes back. We're not too far from the summit right now, and Rubiera, he'll just sit there.
Yes, he won't even sprint it out. Mercado is going to go over the top first. Sastre second. Time to zip up for the descent. Anybody, any newspapers to stuff up the jumpers to keep out the cold air, although it's pretty warm air today. But remember, these guys are very, very hot, and they've been dousing themselves with cold water. So they want to now descend as best they can. Rubiera giving them a little lead. This is Laurent Dufaux. He's not far from the summit, and I'll guarantee this man will catch them on the way down because he falls like a stone.
Well, he's a great descender. He will take all kinds of risks on the first few kilometers of the downhill of this climb. It is a very technical descent the riders will be facing up to. The group of Lance Armstrong, though, is only about 40 seconds behind Laurent Dufaux. The last time check we got was 1 minute 30 seconds separating the 3 leaders and the yellow jersey group. But this is a great move by Laurent Dufaux, and I think you were waiting for it, Phil.
Well, I figured he was going to try somewhere. I just caught a glimpse of him hovering, and I thought he's going to have a go, and he's gone for it. And, well, he's got a great reputation over the years in his Tours de France. He's ridden 10 of them now, including this one. But, you know, he hasn't finished one since 1999, when, in fact, in that year, he finished 4th in the race.
Strangely, look at Virenque moving up to the frontier. This man, he's got so much courage. He's been dropped half a dozen times on the climb, but right now he wants to get himself points, and there are still a lot of points at the top of this first category climb. He's been sprinting it out for 5th place.
Yes, I don't think he'll be challenged. You've got to take your hat off to Richard Virenque. This man has real guts, you know. And he gets the 5th place. He's going to be challenged, and it looks like Christophe Moreau is going to chase him. Another Frenchman. He thought, not likely. There's no way you're going to take the points off me. There comes the sprint. So Moreau goes over just behind him. Then comes Beltran, the boys. And now the chase is on because we plunge down to the valley. The valley of Aix. We go through Aix-les-Thermes. And then we are going to have a battle royal on the climb up to the finish. We're looking at the descent now. These are the 3 leaders. Mercado, Sastre, Rubiera. Don't forget, still ahead, our commercial-free half hour. Enjoy that with us as we go to the finish today. Join us soon on OLN. And welcome back. We are still on the way down with the 3 leaders here. Juan Mercado, Carlos Sastre, Chechu Rubiera, as they descend to the valley for the final 10 kilometers up the mountain on today's stage. No sign yet of the hotly pursuing Laurent Dufaux. Here he is. He's not that far behind. See the difference in style. This man takes risks as he goes wide, but he holds his road and continues to chase. He is in desperate flight here, and behind him is the Armstrong group. And I think too that they might well stay behind today, as these boys, they won't be too interested in. There's much more of an in-battle going on behind. Well, he looks as though he's going down quicker, Paul. He'll be glancing down these big straights here, Dufaux, and I think he'll continue on. We're getting a time check of 55 seconds, so he's not closing in that much at the moment. He needs to go a little bit quicker than that. He'd like to have finished off the pursuit to the three leaders by the time he gets down to Aix-les-Thermes, because that's the town where it's all uphill to the finish.
We'll take a few risks in the corners here right now. It's the first part of the descent that was the most technical, when you lose speed in the early corners on the first few kilometers of the downhill section. Now it's straightening up a bit. He's trying to get down into an aerodynamic position, just straightening himself out on the bike, moving back over the saddle to keep the center of gravity back as far as possible and push himself up to around about 85-90 kilometers an hour. The advantage the three leaders have got right now is on these long sections of descent, they can actually work together, and we can see a big set of work being done by Carlos Sastre there in first position. Sandwiched in the middle is Juan Miguel Mercado, a very good climber, and then sitting right on the back, we just caught a glimpse of Chechu Rubiera. This is the team now of Armstrong.
And there is Ulrich. Now, Ulrich is probably one of the world's worst descenders in the upper echelon of the sport. You may remember when he went off the mountain and Armstrong waited for him once and then continued to attack him later. Says you don't attack a man when he's down. That was such a sporting gesture.
Sporting gesture, which I think was returned on the roads into Gap a few days ago as we left the Alps behind us, when in fact Ulrich was in the group as Armstrong cut the corner in what was probably the most dramatic footage I think we've witnessed in the Tour de France in many years.
It was indeed. Now the time checks are coming down. Dufaux is at 49 seconds, so he's inching closer. This is the very elite group today. We'll call it the Group Armstrong. He's the leader of the Tour. Let's never forget that. In it, though, is also Roberto Heras, Emmanuel Beltran, Alexander Vinokurov, Francisco Mancebo, Denis Menchov, Tyler Hamilton. All the big names at the top of the overall are still in that group. There are the three leaders. We're able to drop in on them from their helicopter. We certainly couldn't keep up with them on a bike, as they now go under what should probably be 20 kilometers to go, and I think it says that, yes, as we wait now to see just how far behind Laurent Dufaux is. These boys flicking left and right on what is a nicely surfaced descent as they go down into the valley. There's a few tricky turns on this, if I remember this descent rightly, Paul, as they come into the town.
Yeah, there are. In fact, it's rather a difficult approach into Aix-les-Thermes, where the Tour de France, by the way, has finished on a couple of occasions before in the town itself, and it's been mainly dominated by the Belgians, because back in 1933 Joe Aerts won the stage down there. In 65, more recently, in the years of Barry Hoban, it was Guido Reybrouck who got himself the stage victory. But in fact, these riders have still got 10.5 kilometers to ride once they get into Aix-les-Thermes, and that is all uphill. Now, this man is going under the 20-kilometer banner right now, and I would say his time gap is inside of 49 seconds.
I would think so. That seemed rather quick. I should have put a watch on that one, because I don't think it was 49 seconds, but that's still what our computers say. Now, what's this? A stretch of the back here for Lance, something we see him do quite often. Gets all the kinks out of the back of those muscles and then back into position, because it's not just your legs that hurt on a mountain stage.
Well, I tell you what, it's good to see here right now that Roberto Heras has come to the front end of this group. Armstrong still has the advantage of having two very good teammates with him. That's Tyler Hamilton at the back of this group, and there are the two US Postal Service riders on the front. It's a bad line. This, in fact, looks like Ulrich at the back of the group here. Now, is there a problem here? This is Ulrich going to the back. He's just looking for drinks, taking on board drinks.
Well, this is looking like the calm before the storm, the final storm of this opening day in the Pyrenees, as they continue their descent down to Aix-les-Thermes, and then the last climb will begin. As we look here now at 20 kilometers to go for Jan Ullrich. Now, before the start this morning, Lance Armstrong was having a conversation with one of the best bike riders and a good friend, and that was Eddie Merckx, and perhaps we can hear what he said.
Eddie Merckx told me last night when he called me, he said, we'll count the dead when the war's done. And there's a lot of racing to go. I mean, today is hard. Tomorrow is extremely hard. Les Ardennes. I mean, there's a lot of bike racing to go. So, and even with the time as it is now, I would feel confident going into the final time trial. Because history, you have to look at what history has shown us in the time trials. So we'll rely on that.
Well, I'll tell you what, the time will never be the same as it is now. It's a question of who will be in yellow, Jan Ullrich or Lance Armstrong. They will not stop attacking each other this weekend. The race goes on. We'll take a break.
And welcome back to OLN's exclusive coverage of Stage 13 of the 2003 Tour. As the racers make the descent, they have one climb to go in Stage 13, but it is a monster of a climb. Of course, we're going to get back to Phil and Paul in just a few minutes, but Bob Roll, let's talk about the U.S. Postal Team and Lance Armstrong. Everybody has said that Lance is attackable, but no one has talked about him attacking, and we haven't seen him attack. We've seen many others attack him during these climbs.
Yes, for the last 4 years in the Tour de France, the U.S. Postal Team has ridden a very defensive race because that's all they've needed to do. Lance has gotten big leads in the time trials and opening mountain stages, so we've never been in a position where we are right now, a wide open race with a lot of qualified contenders very close to the leader, Lance Armstrong. If the shoe was on the other foot, however, and the attack started to come from the U.S. Postal Team, it would be absolute pandemonium out on the roads. You can see Jan Ullrich there marking the tempo set by Manuel Beltran on the shoulder of Lance Armstrong's. But one thing you don't see is any teammates. He has no teammates left. Here's Chechu Rubiera. They sent him on an early break, so the other riders are obliged to chase Rubiera throughout the whole day. Rubiera was the first man on GC in that breakaway. He had almost an hour on some of the guys in the breakaway with him, and if they would have just given him unlimited amounts of time, Rubiera strong enough to take the yellow jersey himself. So Postal, a very solid squad. If we saw Beltran attacking, Rubiera attacking, Eras attacking, and then finally Lance Armstrong attacking, it would blow this race to smithereens. So far they haven't had to do that, but there might come a point when they do, then it'll be very, very exciting bike racing.
And back to Jan Ullrich, too. We just saw him go back by himself to get his own water. I never thought a leader of a team did that.
Oh, absolutely. That's a disaster for the team. No one left to give him a bottle. He has to go all the way through all the riders in the front group on a very twisty descent, take a bottle from his team car, and then fight his way back into the front of that group, and then start to climb. It's not a good situation to be in, and it just shows how weak the Bianchi team is at this point. And if he did get the jersey, to defend it for a couple of days, there'd be no way.
That'd be very, very tough. Well, a tough stage right now. It's once again a very warm day here in France. Let's go ahead and get back to the action and the big climb of the day. Phil, Paul.
Thanks, Kirsten. Bob is really good at that semaphore language, I must say, but absolutely right. It's hard work for Laurent Dufaux out here now as he chases down, and Jan Ullrich, I wonder if he will attack now on that final climb. Dufaux is closing in, 46 seconds, but he's making real heavy weather of this now. These are the elite 14 men behind. Little timeout called here, I think, Paul, because they're all freewheeling now. I don't think anybody in the top positions in this race has missed this group now. This is the real elite. Sadly to say, the only man who isn't here is David Miller, who was currently 14th.
Well, Miller suffering after that time trial yesterday. He's actually been taking antibiotics for a couple of days to get over a bronchial problem. And having a bronchial problem when the temperature is soaring to 35 degrees Celsius, almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit, is not a fun thing to do. But Miller will continue through the mountains and hope to recover and possibly try and challenge in the final time trial, which is a week today from Pornic to Nantes. This is the area of the Pyrenees that we're charging through right now, and these, I think, are some of the most difficult roads that we ever get. They're very tricky, very technical, and very often there is no protection at all for the riders as they go down some of these descents. We're right now, Phil, in the outskirts of Aix-les-Thermes and not too far away from a hotel we stayed at a couple of years ago.
You beat me to it. I was about to say we just passed the door. A very nice chateau we stayed at 2 years ago, so we know this descent, and in fact there was a very nasty crash on this descent 2 years ago when a rider did flip over the barriers. A rider from Holland, was it Bram de Groot? It was Bram de Groot who's back in the Tour, yeah. So we're back with the three leaders now. They must be very careful on this final approach into Aix-les-Thermes, because it is down here where it gets very sinuous. Then we run across this beautiful little spa town, and then we go up the climb of Bonasque. And I must say that Our man behind Dufault will do well to be careful going down as well. 10 kilometers to go, and you see how tight, and it was on this bend where in fact Bram de Groot crashed 2 years ago when we made the same approach to the finish.
Very dramatic it was too. We're about 2.5 kilometers from the center of Aix-les-Thermes. They ride across a small valley floor and then the climb begins in earnest. The full measured distance of the climb by the organization is 9.5 kilometers, but I always put it down at around about 10.5, because as soon as you leave the town it starts to go uphill immediately.
It does, and looks like you're going up round the back corners for a little bit of shopping, but then all of a sudden it kicks up and you're on your way to the summit. Now, Aix-les-Thermes, here we are, a long straight run in now as we enter the town centre. They're seeing these three riders out in front. Rubiera, the only survivor of the original breakaway today of 10 that went away after only 22 kilometres, joined by Carlos Sastre and Juan Mercado. We have Laurent Dufault chasing just behind at 43 seconds now. And then we've got the elite 14 riders of this year's Tour de France, all working out how they can get rid of one another. It is an amazing race, this, and this is the first finishing climb uphill in the Pyrenees, and it's going to be pretty sensational. Just looking here now as the gendarme waves the yellow flag for the split. Sharp left turn here for the riders as they head to the start, the final climb of the day. We'll take a short break and then we'll take it to the finish. And welcome back, and yes, that 30 minutes is what probably remains in the Tour de France today, as they've now, just as we see the big pack here of Lance Armstrong's group beginning the climb now up to the finishing line in the Pyrenees today. Latest situation, the three leaders, Rubiera, Sastre and Mercado, are just 30 seconds ahead of Laurent Dufault, and 2 minutes on this group as we watch it. And Armstrong has told Beltran and Heras to lift the pace. This is amazing. Heras going, sorry, Paul. Heras is starting to go here. Now, he's been hovering off the back. This has got to be 100% effort and then move over.
This is not. This is 110% for Roberto Heras. He's had an unbelievably difficult time this afternoon. He's been off the back on several occasions, and Armstrong has asked him to come forward. He will give everything that he can. This man is lying in 11th place in the overall classification, and the first acceleration has said goodbye to Georg Tochnik, the Austrian champion. It's also said goodbye to the two Jean de la Tour riders. That's Patrice Algon going out at the back there, and the other rider is Stéphane Hubert. Also, the champion of France has popped because of the pressure.
Well, that was a cruel acceleration, and it looks to me as though Heras might have gone. No, it's Beltran. Beltran has gone, but it's bad news, but surely he couldn't have had any more strength left. He was so good on the last climb. But again, the team has tried their best, and it has not worked here. Armstrong has still got all of the men he hoped to get rid of sitting right behind him.
And Sebo on the left-hand side there. Richard Virenque is just out of the saddle in that strange gangly style of his, trying to stay in contact with this group. Beltran has done a sterling job this afternoon for Lance Armstrong, and now all he can do is just ride to the summit as best as you can. There you are, well done, thank you very much. Now it's all up to you just to stay in the bike race.
I always amaze at how these boys get to the finish when they've done what they have done in the terms of helping their team leader, and he's still got to ride home himself. His legs are going to ache all the way up the mountain, and it's going to take him 45 minutes or more. Now, Lance Armstrong still on the wheel of Heras. Ulrich, look at his face on Ulrich. He is waiting. He knows he's under pressure. He knows he's under attack. Armstrong may still believe, in fact, that he's got a problem there as Sastre goes here. So Rubiera has a problem further up.
Well, Sastre has really dug in deep. The man trying to get across him is Mancebo from Ibernesto.com. These guys are looking at 8 kilometers to go to the summit. In fact, the official time difference is 6.9, which is a bit of a surprise. They've gone up 2 kilometers very quickly indeed. Rubiera right now just riding his tempo, but as soon as he gets caught by the yellow jersey of Lance Armstrong and Roberto Heras, he will find a new lease of life. He will dig deep to try and help his teammate. It's looking like an all-Spanish finale today.
And it looks as though Laurent Dufault may have cracked too. He's gone back to almost a minute here with the accelerations of the leading group. Sastre has really looked good today. He came across to the leaders so well, did most of the work, and now he's put them both in trouble behind. So Mercado is being dropped as well, and Carlos Sastre doing the team lead here. The world of good, because if he wins the stage, they're going to move up nicely in the team. Now another attack, and this time it's coming from, I think it's Patrice Algon.
Well, I can't believe that. He was dropped a few moments ago, and as soon as he saw the slowing down of the yellow jersey group, he came straight by them.
Well, you never know. These boys just will not give up. They reach the limit of their ability. They lose contact. They find the field slows down. They rejoin, and they don't say, oh, thank heavens, I'm back with the leaders. They go and hit them and attack.
You should never give up in a bike race like the Tour de France, and this man has come straight by the yellow jersey group of Lance Armstrong. They're getting all of the motorbikes out of the gap right now, but this is where the race is happening. This is where the big challenges are going to come, and in fact, it looks as if Denny Menchov, the leader of the white jersey competition, is also going off the back of the yellow jersey group. The white jersey, by the way, is the race for the best young rider, a rider who is less than 26 years old at the start of the season. This is a surprise too, Mancebo there, Phil. In fact, this is Mancebo at the back, and that is a surprise to see him because he's the leader of Ibernesto.com.
But the whole tour's a surprise, Paul. Everything has gone the way we never expected. It's been a magnificent race. These riders all sense they can do something in the Tour de France, and they're keeping on trying to ferret it out and see what it might be. Carlos Sastre, for example, this is the rider that Tyler Hamilton said he was staying in the Tour for with his broken fractured clavicule, because he wanted to repay Sastre for the work Sastre had done for Tyler Hamilton in other big races this year. And now Sastre has come big today.
He's come huge today. He's a great bike rider. In fact, Tyler Hamilton, when he was involved in that crash, said he wanted to stay in the Tour de France to help this man. Well, Hamilton is in front of him in the overall classification, but this is all about team tactics right now. This man is moving up the overall standings. At the end of today, he will move a lot higher than his 16th place at the start of the day.
Well, Carlos Sastre, no wins at all, but he had a very good 6th place in the Tour of Romandy. He's now 28 years of age, but a very, very strong all-round bike rider. But he doesn't win many races. He only won one, in fact, in his career. But I think now he might be heading to what will be a glowing victory, because it looks to me as though Mercado here has now found the pressure just a little bit too much. The big select group of 14, so Mancebo, I think I said Mercado, and looking at this little group here, it is thinning out. But you know, Richard Virenque at the back, who was in trouble on the past climb, is now seemingly okay on this climb.
I'm pretty impressed with Richard Virenque because he's done well to stay with this group. He's a man in the latter part of his career. He's the leader of the King of the Mountains competition. He really dug deep to get himself points on the summit there of the Côte de Paillere, and right now he's in with the top men in the Tour de France. It looks like Halgon is about to get picked up, and it's amazing how Roberto Heras has dug deep. He's found something very special here to just keep setting the pacemaking for his team leader Lance Armstrong. Halgon is back in the fold, and he will pretty soon get ejected from the rear of this very select group.
Well, the tempo riding of Roberto Heras, we've seen it in tours gone by as he's taken Lance Armstrong inside to the line. Excuse me, and then Lance Armstrong has launched himself to victory. Won't be the case today, I don't think. This race will go into the high mountains tomorrow, and there won't be very much difference in the time overall, because Carlos Sastre is looking like the stage winner right now, but he won't pull back all the time he's lost in this year's Tour de France. He knows that. He's looking for 10.25 minutes. Well, the win bonus is 20 seconds.
Well, the last man to win here was a Spanish speaker, but he wasn't from Spain. He was from a Spanish team, Team Kelme. That was Felix Rafael Cardenas, who got himself the win at the top of this mountain back in 2001. But what was more important for us further down the slope was the battle. And on that occasion, it was a battle again between Lance Armstrong and Jan Ullrich. The advantage on that day went to Armstrong, who got himself 23 seconds advantage over Ullrich. And the battle continued all the way to the summit of the Les Ardennes, which is a climb we're going to in 2 days' time.
It's a long, hard road ahead to Paris. There's no doubt about that. This is Laurent Dufaux. I thought he was going to sweep them up, and he's now started to suffer. The flurry of attacks by the leaders has really hurt him. He's fallen back quite a ways, over a minute behind now. He is still about 45 seconds ahead, though, of the Armstrong group. So he's still riding along in 4th place. This is Carlos Sastre here. and still looking like a winner. He's looking for the 5 kilometre banner first.
He's looking for it, dreaming for it, just ticking the time by until he comes up to it. Right now he's holding on to a minute and 30 seconds advantage over the group. The man who attacked a few moments ago, you can just see Patrice Algon. He's going out to the back of the group, and he's being overtaken here by the leader of Ibanesto.com, Francis Mancebo. Well, this man, he launched a very brave attack, but surely he didn't think he was going to walk away from Jan Ullrich, Alexander Vinokourov, and of course Lance Armstrong.
Well, this select group of 14 is now down to what looks 9 or 10 riders. Geir Tochnik here, just, sorry, I beg your pardon, that's Richard Veron, just tagged onto the back. And all of a sudden, Roberto Heras has found that the angles on this climb is suiting him much better, and Beltran likewise. These guys are going, oh, it's Brubiera, I beg your pardon. Brubiera has come back from the leading group into the front of the group now, which is proving to be quite a plan, because now he's able to give Armstrong a little bit of help.
Plus, he's had a reasonably easy ride this afternoon. He was in that breakaway of 10, which got on very early on in the day after 25 kilometres, but he did nothing at all in that breakaway. He sat on it for all of the time. That will have been team orders, because they knew they would need him later on in the event, and if the group didn't get caught, well, then he would have a chance to get himself the stage victory, which is a very prestigious stage victory today to the summit of the Plateau de Bonasque. Richard Vironk, I think, giving up the ghost here right now, but what a courageous bike rider. He's trying to win the King of the Mountains. Oh, there's a problem there. Heras has popped.
Those legs have gone. Those legs have gone. Roberto Heras, his legs suddenly said, ouch, the cramps have come. This is Halgan climbing past him now. Heras takes a good look at him. He's just going to have to struggle home now. The engine's gone.
It just goes to show you how far into their reserves these guys can push themselves for their leader. When the lights go out, there is absolutely no light at all and no sound, and there's nothing able to come into the body from the engine room.
Now, you saw the race referee through the roof of the car there. He is making sure those vehicles stay behind now, don't form artificial leapfrog stepping stones back up. This is Richard Veron now. His day is done as well, as he now tries to get up there. Mancebo is just up the road in front of Veron. They're calling through neutral service cars now just to go up to the leaders. And this is now when the legs crack. You see the referees allow no cars around the riders.
Tyler Hamilton is in difficulty at the back of the group there with Lance Armstrong. That's coming through on the race radio, as is also Christophe Moreau, the Frenchman. We're not too far away from the group right now. This is Carlos Sastre at the front of the bike race, while his teammate Tyler Hamilton is going off the back end of the group of the yellow jersey of Lance Armstrong. But I still have to say, Armstrong's team today, Phil, have done a superb job in looking after this man who everybody feels has got a problem. But let's not forget, he's still leading the bike race.
Absolutely. No, Lance is fighting like a real champion this year. And if he does win this Tour, he'll have won his best Tour de France. Look at this now. 6 riders are left, 7 just peeping in. And they're the 2 important riders from Euskadi Euskadi, Zubeldia and Mayo. That is Christophe Moreau, I beg your pardon, going off the back with Tyler Hamilton. Oh, he's got that deadpan pace, but he's concentrating, but he is going off the back now.
Well, Hamilton did say he was worried about the Pyrenees, but I tell you what, when you've ridden the Tour de France through the injuries that he's got and you're still lying 4th place in the overall classification after 2 weeks, that isn't too bad at all. We're now looking for the men in the yellow jersey at 5 kilometres to go, and Armstrong still has his faithful Chetu Ribiera with him.
Not easy now to get through the crowds here, as they all want to see, particularly the 2 Spanish riders, but it looks as though Zubeldia is in trouble here. No, it's Mayo. Mayo has lost ground now. He is also cracking. Well, he's not supposed to do this on his favourite terrain, but he has tried a couple of big attacks, and now it looks as though he's cracked himself.
Well, this is one thing that Pedro Delgado said to me about Iban Mayo. He's a superbly talented bike rider, but one day or another, he always has an off day, and this could be the off day for Mayo right now.
Well, the big problem too are the running people now, because they don't look over the shoulder. They get in the way of the riders and the upcoming cars. But just look at this now. Remember at the start today, less than a minute covered the top 3 riders. Well, a blanket could go over the 3 of them right now, because they are riding the mountain together. Hamilton is the one struggling a little bit and losing time on Zubeldia, because Zubeldia is still here off to the right of our picture.
Zubeldia looks good. Vinokurov, though, he's just sitting there watching what's going on.
I think he looked to steal seconds.
He will try and jump away towards the summit of the climb, but Armstrong is looking attentive. He's got a great teammate up alongside him, Chechu Rubiera. Ulrich also is looking quite nervous. He keeps looking around to see who is in the group. Ivan Basso is the man at the back there in the white jersey with the blue bands on it. Dufaux is currently in third place on the road.
Not anymore, Paul. Not anymore, because here they come. 6 of the best, right, going past Laurent Dufaux. Well, I take my hat off to the tactics of US Postal. They put Rubiera up front. He has been their last post down here, the last man to hold Armstrong, and he's been out front since the 22nd kilometre.
Well, if he's their last post, he's stamping his authority on the front end of this group. He really is doing a great job for Lance Armstrong. But look at this, mano a mano, side by side. Lance Armstrong in the yellow and the blue jersey of Jan Ullrich. The 2 former winners of the Tour de France ride shoulder to shoulder on this final climb of the day.
And Ivan Basso in that white jersey there as well. He is also looking for a nudge up the overall classification. Could be 7th or 6th tonight. But these are the cheers for the man who's battled to conquer the climb of Benasque tonight. And this is Carlos Sastre here. It's hard now. It is so steep just before the end, and it's only 9 kilometres, but it must seem like 100 right now. He's around about 4 kilometres to go.
In between, there's still Mercado. This is a return now. Iban Mayo went through a very difficult moment. The race has leveled off slightly. It's easy to say it's leveled off sitting here in a commentary position, but the tempo has slowed down somewhat. Armstrong is keeping a very close eye on Jan Ullrich. Ullrich moving across to the left-hand side of the road. They wants to see what the faces are like on the other riders in the group.
Fit man there, that steer on the left-hand side there, flying the flag for the Texan, Armstrong, who has had, I think, a very tough day, but he's been up to it. He has marshalled his troops. He has had a brilliant day in the Alps. They've tried to attack him, and they have not been able to. At 4 kilometres to go, Chechu Rubiera, and again Armstrong, the first person he's going to thank will be Beltran, and then he will thank Rubiera because they've ridden so well today. This is still the man hanging on, but I'm not sure how far ahead he is. I don't think he is that far, Paul. Any time checks? No. The computer just gives us a question mark when we want to know the answers. But Carlos Sastre is now heading up to the finish, but I think the field, that select little group of 7 men, is probably around 1.5 minutes back.
They're a long way down. This man, if he doesn't crack, he should ride away with the win. But this man, Mercado, is around about 35 seconds in arrears, and he's losing a lot of his impetus right now. Sastre is going to walk away with the victory at the summit of this climb, because behind, the big challengers are still watching each other. I'm surprised to see that the attack hasn't come from Vinokurov. He's probably pretty happy with the way the race is opening out for him just now. Everybody, Phil, is worried about tomorrow's stage with 4 big mountaintop finishes.
Well, this man's worried about winning the stage now. He's made all the right moves. There's another banner. It'll be 3 kilometres to go for him now. The boys behind are inside 4, so they're inside the last 1,000 metres behind him. It is going to be a desperate finish. I reckon they're about 1:15 back of Carlos Sastre at the moment. And this is the hard approach to the line now. We're coming right up to the 3 ski stations up here. And Sastre is trying to get the win, while behind his team leader, Tyler Hamilton, is in a little bit of trouble, and he's probably going to lose his 4th place. Now an attack, and this is an attack by Zubeldia this time. Zubeldia has now got a reaction from Ullrich. Now where is Armstrong? He's got to shut his eyes, suffer, and grab that wheel, because Armstrong is only separated by 34 seconds from Ullrich. And remember, there's a bonus for the first 3 riders. Here comes Armstrong. Vinokurov is first across. Lance, without his team, has crossed the gap. This is a marvellous race.
A marvellous race. He's coming up alongside Vinokurov there. It just takes him on the inside. That's a brave move. A rather dangerous move as well, but he's straight onto the wheel of Ullrich.
Desperate move. And this other rider, the new sensation of the Tour de France, Jaime Zubeldia, had started it. Ullrich was up to it. Now Armstrong again has mastered the occasion. Vinokurov still just about getting on. Might be struggling a bit now, Alexander.
He may well be just in a spot of bother right now, but he's ridden so well so far in the Tour de France, and we've still got 3 more days of Pyrenean mountains to go. Ulrich now is controlling. This is the way he rode when he rode to victory in the Tour de France. He's looking down to see if he can see the shadow of Armstrong. Well, yes, Mr. Armstrong is still there. Ibn Mayo has been put into a certain amount of difficulty too because of these accelerations and the acceleration that came from his own teammate, Jaime Zubeldia.
I was sorry about that, but that guy almost took our camera out, and I was afraid he was going to take out Mayo there, and that was, he really shouldn't be in such a situation. There's a massive crowd up here. We knew there would be. Carlos Sastre is still clear, looking for 2 to go, and the gap is now, we're saying, at 1 minute 40 seconds. I'm pretty sure it's less than that. But here comes a big high-tempo attack by Jan Ullrich. Armstrong still controlling it. He's never spent so long on the defence in all the years he's won the Tour, but he's up to it. And again, another attack now coming from Zubeldia. Lance has got a bit of breathing room on Zubeldia. He doesn't have to answer him yet, but Vinokourov is going to hang on. And if he gets away, then Lance could well find he's back in trouble.
Let's not forget that we've got to look at a third-place sprint as well, and there's still a time bonus for the third-place rider across the line. There are 2 riders in front of the Armstrong group. Carlos Sastre about 45 seconds behind Juan Miguel Mercado, and at 1 minute 40 seconds the group of the yellow jersey. He is going to have to sprint it out at the end of the day to try and get himself. It might only be 8 seconds, but the end of this race, it could be a very important 8 seconds too.
I can't believe we're talking of seconds, Paul. Remember, in the first week of our commentary, we talked of seconds, saying, don't worry, next week we'll be talking of minutes. We are still talking of seconds. 51 across the top 3 riders of this year's Tour de France. It will be virtually the same or even closer by the time we cross the finishing line. This is an amazing Tour. And there's another attack by Vinokourov. Here it comes. Now, this is where he looks for seconds. He needs a 51. And if he can afford to get less if he wins the stage, because he gets 20 for the win. Alexander Vinokourov said he would attack in the mountains. He's waited all day, and this is his move.
This is a great move. This is the move that will get him a few seconds. But look at the power of Jan Ullrich. Armstrong in second position. Ivan Basso just hanging on to 4th place in the line, and the gap is opening. Armstrong is being put into difficulty there. He's lost the wheel of Ullrich. Ullrich has closed the gap to Vinokourov. Armstrong is having a terrible day.
Well, you say it is a terrible day, but it is a great day because he is holding on. Now Ullrich has taken over, and there's a huge cheer gone up here when they've seen Jan Ullrich attack in the finishing zone, and Lance Armstrong is in trouble. He wants that wheel of Ivan Basso. He needs that wheel of Basso. Armstrong in the last kilometres of the climb is now very much on the defensive. The yellow jersey is up for grabs. There is a vacancy for the leader of the Tour de France. Armstrong is on the defensive. Jan Ullrich needs 34 seconds. Vinokourov needs 51. Less if they get in the first 3 because of the bonuses.
Armstrong is down, and he's on the wheel here of Ivan Basso. Now, if Jan Ullrich was to cross the line in 3rd place, Armstrong only has 26 seconds to play with. This man knows it. He's played in the Pyrenees before, and that was when he first won the Tour de France back in 1997. The big man from Germany is back, and everybody, including Zubeldia, is having a hard time staying on his wheel. Armstrong is out of the saddle now, and this is unbelievable. Armstrong would have expected in the Pyrenees to try and put time between himself and Jan Ullrich, but now he is completely and utterly on the defensive.
He has done everything right all day with his team, Lance Armstrong, but this year his legs haven't finished it off like they have in the last 4 years. Jan Ullrich has sensed it. Carlos Sastre, he's going to win now. He's in the last kilometre, but he'll only win the stage. Who will win the Tour de France? There is still a huge question mark over the race after this first day in the Pyrenees. It's the best result in the 28-year-old's career for CSC. Sastre deserves the victory. 2nd place on the road too. Mercado might hang on, but there is going to be one huge battle. That 3rd... Oh, look at this. It's all over. And now the 2nd place bonus could decide the destiny of the yellow jersey here. I've never heard the crowd cheer so loud here. They are watching this battle of the mountains. There is 12 seconds bonus for 2nd place, which means that Ullrich must only beat Lance Armstrong by 22 seconds to take the yellow jersey.
It's going to be a big battle for Armstrong, and you can see the acceleration and determination on the face of Ullrich. That's not affecting the overall stage win today, because Carlos Sastre of Spain is going to get him the win for CSC. You know, Armstrong is beginning to recover. Race Radio saying he's starting to come back to the group of Jan Ullrich. He maybe didn't panic, but right now he's digging so deep to keep the yellow jersey on his shoulders behind the win for this man.
Well, we've overshadowed this man's victory by the incredible race behind, but let's give him his due accolade now. Carlos Sastre, only the second win of his career. He finished in 97, he put a dummy in his mouth, and he has finished with a great win here. Carlos Sastre gets the victory. Will this man get the yellow jersey? He thinks he will. He's clipping these corners like he's going down, just a little descent here. Armstrong has got back up here now with Mercado, but it doesn't matter because this man, I think, is looking for seconds, and here comes Zubeldia as well, and Zubeldia is going to steal that second place bonus. That will help Lance Armstrong. This is unbelievable. Here comes, he digs deep now. Ullrich kicks again. The big man from Germany is looking for a bonus now of 12 seconds. Then we wait to see if 22 more tick by. If they do, we have a sixth leader of this year's Tour de France, and the record, by the way, stands at 8. Here comes Jan Ullrich to the line now. A final kick of determination has destroyed Zubeldia. Don't worry, the camera makes it look closer than it really is. As now Jan Ullrich comes to the line, and then the clock will start. Ullrich is second, Zubeldia gets a third, and now Lance Armstrong, you are brilliant. That is a recovery for you. He saves the day.
Oh, I was just working the calculations. He needed 1:23 to stay in the yellow jersey. The man did not panic. He did not throw it away. He's got time over Vinokourov and Ivan Basso. He could see the race disappearing in front of him, but Phil, he is a true champion. He's not going to throw away the yellow jersey like that. He battled all the way to the line. He saw Ullrich go. He didn't panic. He was going through a hard time, but he recovered and pulled himself back up. But this race is going to go right down to the wire.
Well, it will be seconds now, if nothing more than that. I think about 10, 11, 12 seconds. That'll be the gap between Armstrong and Ullrich. But he kept his cool. Somewhere Lance found that little extra reserve, which he must have forgotten about over the years. He found it today. He keeps his lead in the Tour de France. I've just seen an impossible recovery.
Yeah, well, you've seen a recovery like that once before, and that was back in 1987. Stephen Roach did exactly the same thing when Pedro Delgado, sitting right along us here, did the same thing at the foot of the climb up to La Plagne. It looked as if Stephen Roach had lost the Tour de France, but what a great comeback. Moreau is coming in right now, and on his wheel is the other American in the bike race. Let's not forget Tyler Hamilton. The brave and courageous Tyler Hamilton comes up to the line too.
And he too may just have saved his 4th place overall from Zubeldia. It'll be very, very tight though, but he had a bit of a buffer there. He comes in at 2:34 down, which is useful and good enough, I think, for him to keep his lead.
Laurent Dufaux, great ride by him. He tried to ride across to the 3 leaders on that final climb of the day, the Porte de Paillere, but in fact he never quite made it. But he too will be riding up in the overall classification this evening. And I tell you what, after a day like we've had today, Phil, I can't believe that these guys have got to go out and do it all over again tomorrow.
How are they going to spend 2 more days attacking each other like that in the higher mountains to come?
4 first category climbs tomorrow and 2 second category climbs. Here's the leader of iBonesto.com coming in as well, Francisco Mancebo. He's lost a bit of time too. But Richard Biron, just listen to the crowd as the Frenchman comes up to the line.
Look, so there's the applause for you. He'll keep his lead in the King of the Mountains. He scored a few points out on the course today. He built a big buffer in the Alps. That's what he's aiming for, is to become the 6th winner. Well, the 6th time he's won that, he'll only be the 3rd man to win it 6 times when he does it in Paris. If, of course, he does it in Paris, but nothing's certain in this year's Tour de France. It changes on a daily basis. We have witnessed one of the greatest stages when they all believed they could win.
Well, there's got to be a couple more. We've got 3 more days in the Pyrenees. The crowd going balmy out here because Richard Biron has just arrived, but we have witnessed a great bike race, and the team of US Postal today, I think, did a magnificent job for Armstrong. They did everything to keep him in the bike race. There is Patrice Algon coming up here. He was the man who attacked in the early part of the climb, and he's joined there by the leader of the Young Riders competition in the white jersey there, Denny Menshoff.
Yeah, I got a bit rough for him towards the end, but I think he'll still keep his high overall white jersey placing.
Well, he was leading that competition by 10 minutes. This man did a great job for Armstrong and a great job in the breakaway today, Chechu Ribiera. And,
well, it's all worth it in the end.
It all paid. It all paid at the end of the day, and Although Armstrong was put into difficulty, he still leads the bike race. He's still always able to respond to the attacks. But can he do it for 3 more days?
But they've nibbled away at his lead for days now. They've nibbled a few more seconds off it. It is going to be an impossible race tomorrow. I don't know what we can expect in all of the mountains because Loudonville, it's basically a little valley town in the Pyrenees, but the road to it is atrocious and very, very hard. And then the next day, we're up the mountain at Luz Saint-Sauveur, and then they'll welcome the Luz Ardiden, rather. You start at Luz Saint-Sauveur, and then you have the rest day. They'll welcome that this time.
What a day for tomorrow, but it'll be an emotional day for Armstrong as well, because he goes over the Porte d'Aspet, where they have the monument to Fabio Casatelli, his teammate. And looking at this profile for tomorrow, Phil, the Col de Cour, the Porte d'Aspet, the Col de Monte, the Col de Portillon, and finishing it all off with the very difficult ascension of the Col de Péressourde.
Well, there's a great silence over the crowd now, waiting for the first man to come out for the prize presentation. They're waiting for Carlos Sastre, winner of the stage. 101 to Ulrich and Zubeldia, 108, 7 seconds. How did Lance do that? That was a brilliant recovery. And so 7 seconds and a little gain of 12, so 19 seconds better. Take that off. He's 15 seconds to the good ball, that's all.
It's close. It is so very close, and we're looking at a monumental stage again tomorrow as the riders continue to come in, and riders will come in for the next half an hour on a stage like this today.
And still the riders is Botcherov coming up at the moment as the riders continue to come to the line. Jörg Jatsk is also coming in here. 6 minutes has now passed over, and 5 1/4 hours the riders were in the saddle today. Well, Sastre, remember, has won the stage. Lance Armstrong has saved his yellow jersey. I think we're talking circa 15 seconds. There must be a story about why he has put a baby's dummy in his mouth. Not sure what you call that in American. Armstrong will lead by 15 seconds now. Vinokourov will stay third. He'll have fallen back just a little bit. Wow, excuse us if we say we need a break, but I think that was one of the finest finishes we've commentated on for a long while. We'll take a short break, come back for the presentation here on OLN. Well, we are back on the top of the Plateau de Bonasque. This is the winner of the day's stage. What a stage we have witnessed. Carlos Sastre has got his first ever stage win in the Tour de France, only his second cycling win ever. This is the attack that started the ball rolling, Paul. Alexander Vinokourov, and I thought he'd gone when he did this.
It was a good move, but you see the big guns like Ulrich didn't panic at all, and he just accelerated. Ulrich can't really respond to these accelerations of the climbers. He's like a diesel engine. Once he gets up to speed, you can't stop him, but it takes him a long time to get there. Armstrong was put into difficulty today, and it really was amazing to see the way he dug deep. He knew that the Tour de France was slipping away from him when he saw Jan Ulrich riding off the front end of his group. But he never panicked, and he had to dig into that special area that only champions can go to stay in this bike race and in the yellow jersey.
It certainly was like that finish, as you say, on La Plagne with Stephen Roche, because our cameras were too committed to show us that counter-attack by Armstrong. It was a surprise to us. Here he is anyhow. What did we hear what he's saying here?
Well, this will be in French right now. It was pretty difficult, and I didn't expect to have good legs today after the time trial. It was a very difficult effort yesterday, and difficult to recuperate also. And I was suffering a little bit from dehydration, and I'm not too upset.
C'était dur quand même la fin, les 2 derniers kilomètres.
It was very difficult.
Dans le départ de Parlier.
And at the start yesterday, I had more panic. I knew yesterday I was going to have a bad day. There's another couple of very difficult days in the Pyrenees, and I think my chances will come back to me. Your team did a great job today. Rubiera in the front group, Beltran, Heras. But we were pretty lucky because the Seiko team decided to do a lot of work. Chechu Ribeiro did a great move today to be in the breakaway. And Beltran was superb. He was superb. Well, he certainly has got a big smile on his face, Phil, and I'm surprised.
I'm amazed, Paul, he doesn't seem at all down. He's watched his lead be eroded and eroded, and he's saying that there's still 2 days. Instead of saying, oh, I'm going to be really worried about 2 days, he still thinks he can go well in those 2 days.
He's a champion and he won't give up. He hasn't lost the jersey. He knows the jersey on it is on his shoulders, and it's up to everybody else to take it away.
Well, there's the stage result for you, and that means that Lance will in fact be 15 seconds and no more ahead of Jan Ullrich. So Beldia continues to be the big surprise of this tour. He's third there, and he's now going to shortly overtake Tyler Hamilton. I don't think he will have gained enough time today, because you see Hamilton there in 10th place. As we look out across these beautiful green pastures of the Pyrenees, I have to say this has been one terrific Tour de France. So as we look out across the green fields here,
confirmation of the overall classification
now to get alongside Lance Armstrong. So let's go and see Lance Armstrong with Frankie. There we are.
I'm here with Lance Armstrong, first day in the Pyrenees, very difficult. It looked like on the first climb you responded very well to Alamayo's attacks.
Yeah, but I don't think Mayo was super today. It looked like his teammate Zubeldia was the better of the two. So I figured he would attack there. So I wanted to try and respond and maybe go away with him. In the beginning of that climb, I was in a bit of a crisis. I didn't feel very good. So at the top, I started to feel a little better.
This morning you mentioned you had a bit of a problem yesterday in the time trial, and nobody kind of followed up with that question. So kind of curious, what was the problem?
Well, we just had a classic dehydration. You know, probably started the day at 72 or 73 kilos and finished the time trial at 66.5. So to lose, 8 or 9% of your body weight, in many people's opinion, could be fatal. So I don't know how it happened, and it was an unfortunate thing that happened. And when you're that dehydrated, the power just goes off. And as you saw, as I did, and as people witnessed, I mean, I just pedal squares, and I tried to put it all back in through the mouth and through IVs last night and this morning, but it takes time. You can't recover from a deep effort like that in 20 or 24 hours.
So do you feel confident today, being rehydrated, tomorrow coming into the mountains, that Ulrich tried to take a little bit of time out of you and you're going to feel better?
Yeah, no, I mean, after a deep blow like that with dehydration, I mean, I was lucky to, in my opinion, lucky to end up where I did. So I think I'll be better from now on.
Okay, thank you, Lance.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I have to say that Lance saying there he lost what in effect was 15 pounds of body fluid in that time trial yesterday. That is very, very serious indeed. I don't know how he did hang on to take second place in the time trial. He's still so confident though. Paul, there's Lance saying he lost 15 pounds, but he's also saying, I think I'll be better from now on. He seems to know himself so well.
Well, he's been here before. He's been in difficulty in the mountains before, casting his mind back to the Col de Jouplan a couple of years ago where he dropped, and that really was quite remarkable. I do think Armstrong is very relaxed in this year's Tour de France, and that's what amazes me. He's just lost himself 19 seconds to Jan Ullrich, but still he can smile.
Well, I know what I want to do. I want to go like this because it's been such a tough day. What a great day for Lance Armstrong, though. He, even on his bad days, produces performances like that. I mean, in the commentary there, Paul, he is saying, I lost 15 pounds, 7 kilos is what he actually said he lost in body fluid in the time trial yesterday. Now, that is a serious fluid loss.
It's a serious fluid loss, and all of the coaches and the physiologists will tell you that if you lose 5% of your body weight, you're going to lose 20% of your efficiency. But he's not going to bounce back that quickly, but he's probably been told that he will recover over the next few days, but he will be taking on board a lot of liquid over the next 48 hours. And even though he lost all that weight, he can't put it back that quickly because it's still very, very hot here at the Tour de France.
Well, even though now here it is 5:10 local time, it is so hot it's like sitting in an oven right now, and these boys have just climbed up this mountain. Now, this weather is expected to continue. It's the hottest tour for 50 years, and we're now thinking that tomorrow, on what is, we think, a very difficult day down to Loudonville.
It's a tough stage tomorrow. The riders are going to face 4 first category climbs and 2 second category climbs, and some big climbs as well, like the Col de Porte d'Aspet, the Col de Monte. And to finish it all off, it's almost like a mountaintop finish anyway, because they go over the dreaded Col de Peyresourde.
Yeah, well, don't forget, Alexander Vinokurov still very much in the hunt, and he might try some more attacks tomorrow. We're still down the bottom of our map now on the borders of the Pyrenees, and we stay in these mountains for a few days yet. And this is the map, Paul. Take us through it from Saint-Giron, which is down the bottom from where we are now.
Well, Saint-Giron, and it's almost immediately they hit the first climb of the day, the Col de la Trappe, and not very much respite before they go to the next one, the Col de la Cour, which is a very difficult climb at 1,400 meters. Down into the valley, and then the Porte d'Aspet, which all of the bike riders know, the Col de Monte, which is a very famous climb in Tour history. Down into the valley for a brief respite before the summit of the Col de Portillon. Once again down, and then up again to the Col de Peyresourde and the descent down into Loudonvielle. It's a tough day, and when you look at the race profile, it's up and down all of the time, and there's no respite. It's ideal for a long breakaway situation. Armstrong is going to have to count on his team, but he's also going to count on getting himself back into form. But absolutely remarkable, this man.
Well, we are watching Lance Armstrong as he's finished and saved his yellow jersey. He has now held it for 6 days, but this was the toughest of them all. Ulrich keeps on attacking. We'll take another short break, come back and salute the champions on the podium on OLN. Welcome back. We are now in the High Pyrenees here. Just over the top there is Andorra, and then on into Spain. The mountains have had a word to play in this year's Tour de France. We have seen one of the best battles I think we've commentated on for years and years here up to Benasque. And this is the man who was up first, Carlos Sastre, getting only his second win as a professional rider. He's been around a long time, very emotional at the moment. Carlos Sastre, proudest moment of his career, and he will keep the CSC team way up in the team lead in the competition. I'm pretty sure of that. But he has got the victory, and he will climb a little bit up the overall classification, but that's not what he's thinking about. He is thinking about just winning the day today.
Quite remarkable. This man has been professional since 1997, and this is only his second ever win as a professional cyclist. That's the difficult thing about a man trying to ride high in the overall classification. Sometimes you cannot go for individual glory, and this little dedication here is actually to his wife and young son, because they have been so much behind him when he's had hard times throughout his professional sporting career.
He was 10.25 minutes down overnight. He will have improved, probably up to around 14th or 13th position, but that wasn't the name of the game for him today. It was to get that stage win for the team. Now, as we gaze down on the forested area here around Aix-les-Thermes, or at least where we are now at the Plateau de Bonasque. It's a long way down, isn't it, when you see it from a helicopter? These boys zigzagging the way up here, having not just have to do it once, but twice today, and tomorrow probably best part of 5 times. Here he is, wait for the crowd. A lovely round of applause. I think this year, Lance Armstrong, the crowd have warmed to Lance better than they have done in any of his Tour victories. He's made himself more available to the television. He's spoken in the French language. He's also, I think, now become something of a human being. They didn't like Eddie Merckx because he dominated the race. The day he was losing it, they cheered him all the way home because they saw he could fight as well. Boy, this man certainly can fight now.
Well, he's not losing the race right now, Phil, and I am amazed at how relaxed he appears at the end of all these stages. His advantage has been trimmed down to 15 seconds, and he's congratulated there by a former 5-time winner, Bernard Hinault, and Hinault basically probably said to him, well done. That was pretty impressive what you just did there.
So Armstrong strides across with purpose. His lead is only 15 seconds over Jan Ullrich, as he knows now he's in a tight race. Let's have a look at that GC. Here it is, Lance Armstrong. There it is, 15 seconds over Jan Ullrich, 61 seconds over Alexander Vinokurov. In the end, he lost 10 seconds of his placing there, but held on to third. Zubeldia now is up into fourth. He got the difference over Tyler Hamilton and has leapfrogged him only by a few seconds, but it's important. Hamilton now drops 1 place to 5th. Had a bad struggle today on the climb, but then he saw his teammate win the stage. Iban Mayo, we expected more from him. He did try, but in the end he stayed in 6th place where he was at the start of the day, and his gap has gone out a little bit. Ivan Basso, he's come up from 8th into 7th. while Mancebo has gone from 7th down to 8th. Look at the ascension of Carlos Sastre. He got more time than I imagined. From 16th, he has come right up into the top 10. Hats off to him. And Christophe Moreau, Paul, he holds on 10th place, and he's still the best Frenchman. Well, it is amazing, isn't it? But I really didn't expect Sastre to make that sort of a leap today.
I didn't think he would move up quite that much in the overall classification, but I think the story of the day has to be Lance Armstrong and Jan Ullrich.
Yeah,
they are head and shoulders above of everybody else in this bike race. If Armstrong wants to win this race, he's got to come out of the mountains with at least a minute over Jan Ullrich.
I don't think he wants to win it. Do you think he wants to win it?
I don't think he's given up yet, you know. I think he'd still like to win it for
We
a
have
fifth time.
enjoyed this commentary so much today because Lance Armstrong showed us he fights, and that's what matters in the Tour de France.
That's what a true champion is all about, but that's why Jan Ullrich is also a true champion. He saw that Armstrong was having difficulty and he took the advantage. Let's not forget, last time they came up here, it was the other way round.
Yeah.
Armstrong led Ullrich to the line by 23 seconds. There's still 2 very difficult Pyrenean stages to go, a rest day and then a final day in the mountains. A lot of battle to be done.
But Lance has said in the post-race interviews, he's going to get better. He's not afraid of the 2 days ahead. I thought he would come for, it's so hard and there's still 2 more days to come. No, he says, I'll get better and I think I'll be good. He's done nothing at all in losing his confidence in this Tour de France. And if he wins this Tour, he will have won the greatest race of all 5. And I think, and remember today, he's got now more yellow jerseys than, in fact, Jacques Anquetil. He's now got 52 to Jacques Anquetil's 51. So he ranks now in the top 4 yellow jersey wearers ever in the history of the Tour de France. Anyway, as we watch these great pictures of a man under pressure, we'll just take another short break. Rejoin us very soon here on OLN.
The 2003 Tour de France on OLN is brought to you by Infinity, makers of innovative, high-performance premium vehicles. And by Trek, makers of world-class bicycles inspired by Lance Armstrong. And by Visa. It's everywhere you want to be.
And welcome back to OLN's exclusive coverage of the 2003 Tour de France. I have found out, expect the unexpected in this, Bob Roll. I don't know where you'd like to start, but let's first talk about Carlos Sastre. A great stage win by him, his first ever in the Tour. And what chemistry between him and Tyler Hamilton, that CSC team.
Absolutely awesome CSC team this year in the Tour. Second stage win after Jacopel a couple days ago. Think all of the riders on this Danish team taking inspiration from their team leader, Tyler Hamilton, who's done the whole Tour de France except the prologue with a broken collarbone. Tyler had a little bit of a rough day today, losing some time, but his teammate Carlos Sastre will be very proud of that. I don't think we've ever seen a bike racer put a pacifier in his mouth as he came across the line. We might never see that again either.
I kind of like to see a grown man with a pacifier in his mouth. I don't know. No, that was highly unusual, we must admit. Whatever, right? That finish line, you're the first person to it. You can do whatever you want in my book. In my book. Okay, we saw a lot of riders digging deep. I mean, deep today. A very warm day once again. That first climb, I saw a lot of people drop. We definitely saw a first group on that first climb, and then onto the second climb. I mean, let's talk about it. Lance Armstrong, Jan Ullrich, Vinokourov, Iban Mayo, Zubeldia. Take your pick.
A very dynamic stage today. Everyone attacking at the end, realizing there's only a couple more days after today left in the high Pyrenees where they can get an advantage or lose an advantage. The most courageous man on the mountain today was Lance Armstrong, responding to a number of attacks. Chechu Rubiera did a great ride to go in the breakaway and then still have enough power to lead Lance Armstrong once Roberto Heras fell off the pace. But in the last 5Ks, it was all up to Lance Armstrong to counter the attacks by Ullrich, by Vinokourov, even by Aymar Zubeldia. It was an incredible ride. I don't think I've ever seen Lance have a gap opened up on him since he started winning the Tour de France in the mountains. This is Carlos Sastre winning a great stage, going very, very deep into his reserves. Then it was an absolute war behind Sastre for the GC battle. First it was Vinokourov. This was a lethal attack that put everybody in the front group into trouble. You can see it's just 4 guys now, all of our big dogs on GC. Jan Ullrich took up the pacemaking after that and put in a big, big move, and Lance was in trouble at this point. Lance had to dig so deep in the last 2 kilometers to catch up to Jan Ullrich. And once Jan Ullrich got ahead of steam up, it was just a roller coaster to the finish line, just absolutely flying. He did a great ride, swept past Mercado in the finale. No one could catch Sastre, who had a great ride for the CSC team, and a little bit nice for them because of Tyler Hamilton losing some time. Great ride by Sastre, fantastic ride by Ullrich, and a beautiful effort by Lance Armstrong.
I know I was gasping during a couple of those moments with Lance Armstrong, but we all have to remember that he loves that cat and mouse game. Okay, let's look at tomorrow. Another very difficult stage here in the Pyrenees.
This is a vicious stage, 191.5 kilometers from Saint-Giron to Ludanval-la-Luron. There's 4 Category 1 climbs. La Trappe is the first climb, a Cat 2, Cat 2s, La Cour, Col d'Aspet, Monte, the Portillon. They'll also climb the Père-Sor just before they go down to the finish in La Luron, Ludanville. An incredibly difficult day. 6 climbs out there. It's going to be very hot. So another big day. Lance Armstrong very dehydrated during the time trial, losing almost 15 pounds of weight. That is almost unheard of at this level of the sport, and to be able to still be in the bike race, still have the yellow jersey on, is unbelievable. And watch for him to be feeling better the more climbs we do.
All those riders need, yes, make sure no dehydration for tomorrow, and please recover for stage 14. Well, don't forget, we are not on live tomorrow, but you can catch us for a primetime special edition that begins at 8:30 p.m. with our pre-race show. We'll have all the highlights from today's stage and look forward to tomorrow's stage. Don't forget, you can always catch us on the web. That's olntv.com for updates and information, and also from articles from Phil Liggett, Paul Sherwen, and Bob Roll. Well, that's going to do it from here in France. From our entire OLN team, a very hot and sweaty team, we wish you good night, and we will see you tomorrow night for more action in the 2003 Tour de France.